I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lincoln-Lancaster County Planning Commission of January 23rd, 2019. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available at the front of the chambers with the clerk. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. If you parked in the parking garage across the street to the north, the gate is open and no parking coupons are needed. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, the commissioners and the staff, cellular phone usage is not permitted in these chambers during any portion of this meeting. We appreciate your cooperation. Please note that the Planning Commission action is final on agenda item 1.5, that is special permit 18050. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council or County Board by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. And the first item of business today is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held January 9th, 2019, as revised.
So moved. Campbell.
Second, Joy.
Okay.
I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, Campbell.
Yes.
Beckius.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Washington.
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
I don't get to vote?
And Shear.
Yes.
I'm sorry. 6-0. I'm bouncing all over
5.
the place.
Okay, the next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Jerry to read all of the consent agenda items into the record. Once those items are read, she will ask if there is anyone wishing to speak. And if you wish to speak on an item in the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. Then that item will be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled as a separate public hearing under Section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Jerry, will you please call the items on the consent agenda?
Yes, thank you. Item 1.1 is text amendment 18007, amending various sections of Title 27 of the Lincoln Municipal Code related to solar and wind energy conversion systems as described on today's agenda and repealing said sections as hitherto existing. Item 1.2 is text amendment 18015 to amend the Lincoln Municipal Code Titles 26 and 27 to fix technical errors and redesignate all references of public works and utilities to transportation and utilities, and repealing associated text in Titles 26 and 27 of the Lincoln Municipal Code is hitherto existing. Item 1.3 is change of zone 18035 from P Public Use District to I-1 Industrial District on property generally located at 4040 North 48th Street. Item 1.4 is change of zone 19001 from R2 Residential District to P Public District on property generally located at North 70th and O Streets. And item 1.5 is special permit 18050 for a special permit for reconstruction and expansion of a non-conforming building containing a dwelling unit and garage with waivers to side and rear yard setbacks and minimum parking requirements on property generally located at 5627 Madison Avenue. Again, this is final action on this special permit unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed?
I see none.
Is there anyone here wishing to speak on any of these items? If so, please stand and state that item.
I think we'll entertain a motion.
Move approval, Beckius.
Second, Washington.
Okay.
I think we're ready to vote.
Beckius?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
There are no requests for deferral, so we will now proceed to the public hearings. The staff will make a brief presentation, then the applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and then the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. If during your testimony you have copies of documents or materials you would like distributed to the Planning Commission members and/or included as part of the record, please provide that information to the clerk for distribution prior to the time that you start your testimony. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes, then you will have 1 minute to wrap up your testimony. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the Commission votes to defer action or continue the public hearing. Jerry, please call the first public hearing item.
Okay, item 4.1A is Comprehensive Plan Amendment 18005 to amend the Lincoln Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan to include the Lincoln Bike Plan by reference in Chapter 12 and to include text and map updates from the Lincoln Bike Plan in Chapter 10, along with the associated miscellaneous 18004 to amend the Lincoln Metropolitan Planning Organization Long-Range Transportation Plan to include text and map changes from the Lincoln Bike Plan. Staff recommendation for the comprehensive plan amendment is approval. Staff recommendation for the miscellaneous 18004 is conditional approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these agenda items?
Yes, I had a short conversation with members of the Nebraska Trails Foundation about this plan.
Noted. Thank
Any
you.
others? Okay, thank you. Kelly.
Thank you. Jerry, I'll hand that out in case they need a copy. Good afternoon. Just want to talk a little bit about the Lincoln Bike Plan. So the current long-range transportation plan and Chapter 10 of the comprehensive plan reference the need to develop a high-level plan for our on-street bicycle facilities network. And so over the last year, the City of Lincoln, along with the Lincoln MPO and our consultant FHU, have been working to develop that with various times of community input along through that whole process. So today we're requesting to amend the long-range transportation plan and then Chapter 10 of the comprehensive plan in an effort to keep those consistent. Amendments to both documents include revision of language to include reference to the Lincoln Bike Plan and to update the proposed on-street bicycle facilities and off-street trails map. That's map 12 in the long-range transportation plan and then map 10.12 in the comprehensive plan. The Lincoln Bike Plan identifies a network that builds from the existing trail network and on-street bike facilities. The network identifies ways to connect on-street bikeways and trails and will ultimately connect people riding bikes to key destinations. The network proposes the spacing of bicycle facilities in the downtown area at roughly 3 blocks and gradually becomes less dense toward the city's edge with roughly 1 mile spacing between routes. Completion of the bike network is expected to occur over time, roughly the next 20 years, as resources are available. The proposed network is divided into 135 individual projects, which may occur as part of routine street rehabilitation and capital roadway projects. By combining the implementation of the bike network with other street projects, the projects could be completed at a significant cost savings. The pace at which the recommendations of this plan can be implemented will depend first on funding availability and then also dedication of staff resources. Many of the projects will require further detailed traffic and design analysis along with public process before implementation on a project-by-project basis. The facility types identified are subject to change based on additional traffic and design analysis at the time of design and implementation. The City of Lincoln has successfully pursued grants and partnerships for trail and on-street bike projects in the past. Implementing the network again will require a sustained pursuit of funding opportunities and is expected to occur over time. The amendments proposed to the long-range transportation plan and comprehensive plan are consistent with the goals of each document, so we are requesting your recommendation of approval today. Do you have any questions?
Questions? I don't think so.
Okay.
Maybe later. Thanks.
Okay.
Do we have testimony in support of this item?
Hello. I'll be putting these up on the slide.
Okay, very good.
There
Thank
you
you.
go. Hi, my name is Jamie Granquist, and I am a lifelong Lincoln resident. I am a sometimes bicycle commuter, depending on what's going on, and I happen to manage the Bike Link program. So I'm the city manager of Bike Link, the bike share that's just started in April. Got some stats there for you. All right, so essentially I wanted to explain to you guys what bike share is in case those of you that don't know. So we have 19 kiosks throughout downtown Lincoln and also 100 bicycles. So what users can do is they can walk up to a kiosk and purchase a single ride pass, or they can also become members and ride more often during that specific period of time. In 2018, we launched on April 20th, and through the end of the year we had over 28,000 trips. That breaks down to 66,600 miles traveled by the riders with a carbon offset of 63,109 pounds. That also equals 2.6 million calories burned of people not sitting at stoplights but actually moving their bodies through space to get where they need to go, which we all need to go places, right? And just to show you guys that people actually do ride bikes in wintertime, which is why we're talking about bike lanes that aren't going to go away. This shows our riders through each month through the year. So you can see that even in November and December, respectively, we had 2,400 trips in November and 1,100 in December. So even though it does get cold and snowy, no news to us, we actually do see people riding still on the trail system. And so basically what I wanted to show you next is the bike map, which is what we're here for today. So some of these trails are existing and some of them are proposed in the bike plan which you guys have. And so I'll show you some of the top trips that we have. So the first trip I'm going to show you has been taken over 1,800 times, and that is just from the Student Union to 11th and N. So those people are just using essentially 3 different on-street bike facilities that currently exist in the system, and that's been taken almost 2,000 times just in 9 months. The next route that I'm going to show you is essentially from 21st and Q and 12th and N. So those trips have been taken over 1,500 times using those facilities. So you can see that kind of builds off the previous slide that I showed you and adds a little bit that goes out to the east towards Assurity. And then the next routes I'm going to show you, these are our most popular round-trip routes, 11th and N, 14th and R, and 21st and Q. So these kind of add to that system, and you can see it expands then out to the rail yard as well. And that was taken over 2,000 times. And our fourth most popular route, that includes the rail yard and some of those towards campus systems, and so that definitely increases the spread and width of the infrastructure that's being used, and we see that that was taken almost 2,000 times. And then last but not least, this includes the outer perimeter of our system. And so you can see that you start getting the trail system usage in there that currently exist, the Antelope Valley Parkway, also along Salt Valley, and then down towards the rail yard outer areas. And so you start to get those casual trips, and those were taken over 1,500 times. And so basically what you see there is you see people using the bikes to get around. Instead of getting in their car and going from here to there, they're using it to get around. So much so that they could have went across Lincoln over 71,000 times in just 9 months, which is pretty impressive. And that equals 3,200 gallons of gas that were not used. So those are people not taking up parking spots, people not polluting the air, people moving their bodies through space instead of using those parking garages and those parking spots and those precious resources that we have as far as oil and gas go. And then last but not least, Renzas. Who doesn't like Renzas? So we got to talk about calorie burn, right? I mean, that's why we're all here, right? Most of us have Fitbits on our wrists. Steps aren't the only thing that matter. If these people go out and they ride to lunch, ride back to their car parked on the outskirts of Lincoln, it saves not just that traffic congestion that we have downtown and those precious resources between buildings that are frankly very hard and expensive to move. You can eat more Renzas, which is great. But you know, honestly, it all boils down to what are you doing for yourself? What are you doing for others? And how can we cut down on this traffic congestion by making these routes that make sense? We wouldn't be able to have over 28,000 trips if the infrastructure that we have in place wasn't as great as it is. But we can always make it better. And so that's what a bike plan tends to do. The bike plan isn't a bike plan, it's a people plan. It's a people on bikes plan. How do we get more people on bikes in a way that's intentional, in a way that gets them to go where they need to go, in a way that helps everyone? And this plan benefits Lincoln as a whole. So I hope you vote for it.
Questions?
Thank you for sharing that information.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Other testimony and support?
Hi, my name is Barb Fraser. I live at 3210 Laredo Drive here in Lincoln. I'm here today because I'm a person who likes to use the bicycle for fun, for health, for recreation, and for transportation. I believe it's important for our city to continue to provide people with a balanced transportation system, a system that allows citizens a choice for how they'd like to get around, a system that focuses on all users, people on foot, people on bikes, people using transit, people using vehicles, and other ways that we are learning about moving around. I was a member of the Bicycle Facilities Advisory Committee. I helped to give opinions and feedback with the development of the Lincoln Bike Plan. I've worked 20 years or more encouraging active transportation, much from the public health perspective. I count myself as one of those interested but concerned bicycle riders. I'm not real comfortable always navigating through lots of traffic, especially high-speed traffic. Having extra infrastructure in place makes me feel more comfortable, more likely to use the bicycle for transportation. When I decide to make a short trip, like to the grocery store, to mail a package, I stop and think, how much do I have to interact with cars, or do I have to cross a scary intersection? So the more that we can do to, in high traffic areas especially, make it more comfortable, the more likely it is that we'll see people use bicycles for transportation. I'd like to talk just a little bit more about how this plan could enhance public health. I provided you with some statistics. I won't read them all, but we read more and more that inactivity and obesity is a concern in our community. A 2004 report estimated inactivity results in $24 billion in annual health care costs, or $231 per person. A more recent estimate makes that closer to $117 billion in annual health care costs in the U.S. Nebraska has the 13th highest adult obesity rate. That's about 32%. If we have bicycle facilities and infrastructure, that provides opportunities for people to engage in more physical activity and to improve health. If we could encourage people to make short trips, those trips that are less than 2 miles or so by foot or on bicycles, especially in the 11 largest Midwest cities, it's estimated we could lower mortality by 1,295 deaths per year, and that would be from improved air quality and also increased physical activity. There was an article in Forbes magazine in 2017 referencing a British Medical Journal article that talked about the benefits of cycling to work, and that commuters who cycled to work had a 41% lower risk of dying from all causes than people who drove or took public transport. So not only did they have a less chance of death, but even developing those diseases just by being out and about. There's lots of other benefits reported from bicycling, including mental health, lower stress, environmental benefits, and one's just more able to connect with others in the community. When you're out on a bike, you can more easily talk to someone who might be on the street and engage with others. It just helps to build community. I've seen it happen. Cities around the U.S. have found that protected bike lanes increase bike ridership, reduce motor vehicle speeding, reduce crashes, and improve people's feelings of safety on those streets. Providing bicycle infrastructure can make streets safer for all users, even those in cars. I'm very encouraged that the vision in this plan includes a focus on people of all ages and abilities, or what we sometimes call the ages 8 to 80 perspective. It's looking at young people, people my age, maybe even people older, and everywhere in between. I'm also pleased to see that we're working to make connections so that people can get from one place to another, and we're looking to provide access for all areas of the community. I would encourage the adoption of the Lincoln Bike Plan so that we can continue to strengthen the livability of Lincoln.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barb.
Testimony in support.
Hello, my name is Matthew Roque, and my address is 5252 Lowell Ave, Lincoln, Nebraska. I also was a member of the Bicycle Facilities Advisory Committee. Very different from the people that just spoke. I am purely a recreational user of bicycles. I am not a commuter. To my knowledge, I've never commuted to work using a bike or go to the grocery store or anything like that. But I think that was one of the benefits of being on this committee, was we were able to look at the perspective of those who are not necessarily commuting to work, but just going out recreationally and wanting to ride a bike. So as we worked our way through the process, we looked at all the different things, how they affected commuters, as well as those who just ride recreationally. The maps that you see before you in the plan, all the items that we talked about, the education for elementary school students, things like that. The goal of all of that is to get more people riding bikes, whether it's to get to that level where they're commuting every day, or to get somebody who's never ridden a bike before and get them to the point where they want to ride it 2 or 3, maybe 4 times a day just around the park. So at that time, all I want to say is that I support this. I think it's important for the community, and I'll take any questions.
I don't see any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for serving on the committee.
You're welcome.
Testimony in support.
Hi, my name is Becky Witt. I live at 2711 South Street. I'm a reformed biker. I started riding a bicycle, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, and I got involved in the bike challenge. And the year I turned 65, I rode 2,000 miles over the summer on my bicycle. I was almost killed over 10 times. I would come to a bike intersection with a street. I'd have a green walk signal. Somebody's not looking. They're going to make a right turn. I screamed. The lady stopped. This has happened to me so many times I bought a referee's whistle. And I'd whistle. And there was one time that didn't work. I knocked on the fender. Finally, the passenger jostled the driver to let me go. It's alarming at how hostile some automobile drivers are. They intentionally try to run you off the road. We lost Randy Gibson, who was an inspiration to me and many others in our community. And I literally stopped riding a bicycle because of this danger. So rather than promote the health aspect, I'd like to promote the safety aspect. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Testimony in support.
I'm Bob Kozelka, live at 1935 A Street. In 1970, I chaired a subcommittee of the Mayor's Bicycle Safety Committee called Long and Short Range Planning. And we developed a plan which was adopted in the city plan and in the transportation plan. And most of it's been built. So I just am up here today to encourage you to keep this going. Nothing had been done by the city, and Sam Schwarzkopf, the mayor at the time, put money in to build a bridge to Eden Park and to put up the signs that are still up today. So what you're doing today, 40 years from now, someone else will come up and say, good job.
Thank you.
I'll answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Testimony in support. Okay, testimony in opposition. I don't see any. Does anyone else see any hands? Help me. Okay, thank you. We'll go to staff questions. Are there any staff questions? See any staff questions? And there is no applicant rebuttal because the city was the applicant. So we will entertain a motion. We need to call for separate motions here. So call a motion for the first item first.
Staff recommendation is for the approval of Comprehensive Plan 18005.
So moved, Washington.
Second, Campbell.
Discussion?
I think this is a really good plan. I really appreciate hearing testimony from folks who are both avid commuters and recreationists and those who ride in between. I really appreciate the amount of work, the comprehensive nature, and the public input in this plan. Thank you. On the record, I am a recreational user only.
Tracy.
I think it's very wise to go ahead and take this next step and include this as a part of the comprehensive plan overall. I think that's an important step to make us even more friendly bicycle community. For the record, I used to be highly confident and would commute to things, but then I flipped on the other side, and it is dangerous, those right-hand turns. So I shouldn't say, now I'm like somewhat confident, but I respect people that, you know, it can be kind of scary out there. So I think that happens as we get older. We realize, you know, we become a little bit wiser, like, oh, I shouldn't have been doing that. But I think this is a good step in the right direction, and I wholeheartedly support it.
Anyone else? I support it also. I just want to mention a couple, three things I'm really impressed with the plan. First one is the process. I think the public process was incredible. Sandra mentioned all the input that was taken. That's a tremendous thing whenever we get into a planning process like this. The fact that this plan addresses the gaps in the system and has prioritized those, I think, is really a critical issue that will make our current system much better, even as we look farther into the future. And then just piggybacking on something that Tracy said, the fact that I think the plan really addresses a large segment of the population. You don't have to be an avid bike rider to really appreciate what this plan does. So I wholeheartedly support it. I think it's a great plan. I think we're ready to call the roll.
Okay, Beckius?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay, motion for item 4.1B.
Conditional approval of miscellaneous 18004.
Move approval, Core.
Second, Washington.
Any discussion? I think we're ready to vote.
Okay. Beckius?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Okay, item 4.2A is Comprehensive Plan Amendment 18004 to amend the Lincoln Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan to include the 33rd and Cornhusker Sub-Area Plan and Corridor Enhancement Plan as identified on today's meeting agenda, and the associated miscellaneous 18003 to amend the Lincoln Lancaster County Long Range Transportation Plan to include the 33rd and Cornhusker Sub-Area Plan and Corridor Enhancement Plan by reference as identified on today's meeting agenda. The sub-area plan is generally bounded by North 27th Street and Dead Man's Run on the west, Superior Street on the north, North 48th Street on the east, and the properties immediately south of Cornhusker Highway on the south, and the project area is approximately 590 acres, more or less. The corridor enhancement plan is generally bounded by Cornhusker Highway and adjacent properties from North 11th Street to North 56th Street, Lincoln, Lancaster County, Nebraska. Staff recommendation for both the comprehensive plan and the miscellaneous item is approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed?
Yes. Andrew presented at the mayor's roundtable in January.
Okay, thank you. Noted.
Andrew.
Andrew Theroff, planning staff. So as Jerry mentioned, I'm here to talk about two applications, the comp plan amendment, which is the CPA, and then the long range transportation plan amendment, which is the miscellaneous application. So this project has two elements. There's a sub-area plan, and then related to that is a corridor enhancement plan. So I'll kind of step through both of those. These projects come about as a partnership between the city and then the Railroad Transportation Safety District, the RTSD. The plans are part of a much larger process looking at addressing the at-grade railroad crossings along Cornhusker between 27th and 48th. That process started in 2015 with the Pell study, and it's still ongoing, and it will continue for several more years. What we're talking about here today is not the entire process, but specifically the sub-area plan and then corridor enhancement plan pieces. So we do have a couple different study areas to look at with regards to these plans. So the boundary in red is the larger RTSD project study area, 27th, 48th, Superior, and Holdridge. What we're talking about today is the yellow and blue lines. So the yellow area is the sub-area plan boundary. It's bounded by 27th, 48th, Superior, and then just kind of roughly south of Cornhusker there. And then the area in blue is the corridor enhancement plan boundary. So that is Cornhusker Highway between 11th and 56th Streets. So when I'm talking about these, this is the area we're talking about. I'll start with the sub-area plan. At a very, very high level, it includes an analysis of existing conditions, and then it provides detailed recommendations for future land use, potential development and redevelopment sites, transportation infrastructure, and other enhancements. This future land use map is kind of the main organizing idea behind the plan. At a very broad sense, it's showing the area transitioning away from being almost exclusively industrial uses to being a more balanced mix of industrial, commercial, residential, and open space uses. Something else to note on this plan is it is showing the preliminary preferred street alignment. I'll just point out a few details on that. So it's showing 33rd Street crossing here being closed. 33rd Street would be aligned with a bridge over the tracks and then connecting onto Cornhusker here. The Adams Street crossing of the tracks would be closed, and there would be this new fishhook bridge here for Adams. The 44th Street crossing here would be closed and then become a pedestrian overpass. And this is also showing some other more long-term projects, 33rd connecting up into Superior Street, and then Salt Creek Roadway connecting up directly into Cornhusker. So those are kind of the main elements of the street alignment. It's important to point out that this is not the final alignment. We're calling this the preliminary preferred alternative. There's been a couple years of work going into these specific alignments. There's still a few more years of work before these will be finalized, designed, and actually constructed. We had to show something in this plan though. So this is where we're at now for our preliminary preferred alignment. It could always change in the future. If it does change, we'll come back through, and if the change is significant enough, we'll amend the sub-area plan and corridor enhancement plan to recommend or to reflect whatever the new alignment will be. The other piece of this is the corridor enhancement plan. That details the overall look and feel of the streetscape as envisioned. Here's an example graphic from the plan, and it shows the types of things that the corridor enhancement plan is looking at. Street trees, sidewalks on both sides of Cornhusker, enhanced landscaping in the median, which could include things like street trees and some sort of decorative monumentation. The plan also looks at private property design standards. It doesn't actually provide the detailed design standards that would be put into code, but it does provide guidelines for whenever we decide to actually create those design standards, we can reference the corridor enhancement plan to see the types of things that we should be looking at. This process involves really significant public engagement. We put together a advisory committee of over 50 stakeholders, property owners, residents, employees in the area. We had 3 public open houses, an online survey, a very detailed public website, 33rdcornhusker.com, which has a lot of documents on it still today. And then we mailed out notices to over 4,000 property owners in the area. So if we go back to this first map, it was actually everyone in the red area, so much larger than even the sub-area boundary was. So those were mailed out before every open house. Since this is a comp plan amendment, I will very quickly walk through what the actual amendments are to the comp plan. We'll be updating the future land use map to match the future land use plan that I just showed you, the commercial centers map, the mixed use nodes and corridors map, and then we're adding these plans by reference on our sub-area plans list in Chapter 12 of the comp plan. And then Chapter 10 of the comprehensive plan is the text from the long-range transportation plan, so that will also be updated. In terms of the long-range transportation plan amendments, we'll be updating the candidate capital roadway projects map and table. And then there's a brief summary discussion about these plans in the LRTP as well. One final thing, I think you all got a memo just now that we put together. We sent in a memo yesterday with one change to the plan. There's been a few other minor changes to the plan since the staff report went out. Really quickly, what those changes were are on the land use map, just clarifying that we would want a 300-foot separation between industrial and residential uses. That is the existing city policy, but we just wanted to clarify that in the plan itself. The staff report noted that there was one section that was originally listed as mixed-use residential neighborhood. We're changing that to business flex park in the southeast corner of the study area. There were also some additional pages that reference that we updated as well. Probably the most notable one is the business flex park category, which is, if I pull up the future land use map, that's the light purple area here and over here. We updated the language on that just to clarify a little more what we were thinking about with that district. And one thing we specifically added was that light industrial uses could be permitted within this district. And that's something we heard at the open house last week, that there were people concerned that it wasn't listed in there. So we did add it in there because the intent always was that some light industrial would be permitted. And then we also added some text clarifying street tree location. The corridor enhancement plan is showing the street trees behind the sidewalk. Our ideal location is between the curb and sidewalk to provide protection for pedestrians. Since Cornhusker is a state highway, there is some additional review that goes into that with the state, and they have some clear zone requirements. So we probably will not be able to actually put the trees in between sidewalk and curb, but the plan does still make it clear that that's our preferred alignment, but we'll work with the state on the specific location of those. And then the final minor change is that the corridor enhancement plan talks about a wayfinding system, and we just added text to clarify that City of Lincoln already has a wayfinding system, and that should be integrated into whatever we do on Cornhusker. So with that, I'll take any questions. Planning staff's here, RTSD staff is here to answer any questions you might have.
Questions?
I have one question.
Yeah.
You mentioned the change from mixed residential neighborhood to business flex park.
Yeah.
Would you show me where that is, which spot?
That's right here. So on the original plan that
Got it.
I think was sent out when you guys first got the staff report, it was showing this as mixed residential. There are some fairly heavy industrial users here, so we felt it'd be good to have the business flex park as a transition between the industrial and the single family here.
Remind me what business flex park means.
It's a variety of uses. It could include commercial, residential, some light industrial. It's meant to be kind of a hybrid of a mixed use type district where there's kind of a higher level of design, or instead of saying we have a bunch of small parcels and we'll develop them independently, we should look at it as a whole and develop more planned out developments.
What's there now in that section?
So in this area, there's a mix of mainly light industrial buildings. Some of it is vacant. Over here is, again, some light industrial buildings as well. So that's part of the reason why we added light industrial back in there, is that we're not necessarily saying we want to just get rid of all the existing light industrial there today.
Andrew, do you have a little chunk of flex also? Let me try and see what street that is.
Is it here where I'm pointing?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so that was another change that was added in. Originally it was shown as green space because there was some question about whether with this Adams Street new bridge, whether we'd have need to just acquire all of that for the bridge. It looks like we probably won't have to, so we just changed that back to essentially reflect what's there today, which is commercial uses, to change it back to business flex park.
Other questions?
I have one more.
Yes, Tom.
Andrew, with the memo that came out today, could you discuss the adding of the text to the land use recommendations regarding the 300-foot separation of industrial and how that would interplay with the I-1 that's existing on Cornhusker today, particularly on the south side of Cornhusker?
Yeah, so really that's just reflecting an existing city policy, and
Sure.
it's really specifically tied to when we'd have new industrial proposals or even new residential proposals, not putting them within 300 feet of each other. The existing industrial, we already have some pieces where it's within 300 feet. That's grandfathered in on that sense.
Sure.
But definitely with any new industrial or residential proposals, we would want to have them separated from each other.
Okay, so the future land use map is indicating that is industrial?
Yeah. You're talking right, like south of?
Correct.
Yes, yep.
Would any of that actually be able to be used as industrial if it were redeveloped?
Yes, it is existing industrial, so.
Existing, but for
Yeah.
future land use, redevelopment, would any of it be able to be used for industrial going forward with this 300-foot buffer?
Correct, yes. Since there's an existing industrial there, even redeveloped as a different industrial use, it would still be permitted per our policy. There could be some more extreme examples of really heavy industrial uses that we obviously wouldn't want near residential, but that would be a very rare
So
case.
just so I'm understanding this correctly, if I bought a parcel there that's zoned I-1 now, that's within 300 feet of a house, tore it down, built something new, I could still have the exact same permitted uses that I have in I-1 today?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Andrew, what would go in that 300-foot area?
So it's really just, you can't have residential uses. So this is a citywide thing. This is an existing citywide policy. A lot of times what happens is, say there's apartment complexes, the parking lots for the apartments could go in there, or the parking lot for the business could go in that 300-foot buffer. It's a good spot for, if the topography allows it, like your detention, stormwater quality features. And then you could have some lighter, like commercial uses as well within that.
Where on this map would we see impact from the 300-foot buffer, Andrew?
So really, so the dark purple and the light purple all would allow light industrial uses. So there could be industrial anywhere within, a good chunk of this map, anywhere where you see purple. So.
Okay, so this is existing city policy. How is it impacting the sub-area plan? Or other than the fact that you would...
Yeah. So like a good example of it would be this existing residential up here.
Sure.
We wouldn't want an industrial user within 300 feet of that existing residential. So if someone came in with a plan, we'd encourage either maybe you could have your parking within 300 feet of that, or some of the other things that I had just talked about, but we wouldn't want an industrial facility right along the border here of this area. So that's an example of an area where it would really come into play. It would also be, since this light purple area is, you could have residential or light industrial or commercial. Any new proposals that would incorporate light industrial and residential, if we would have anything like that, we need to make sure they'd be separated.
So the policy is if there's an improvement on the property today, it's forever grandfathered?
If there's an existing industrial user on the property today, it could be redeveloped with an industrial user. So the way the policy works, it kind of goes both ways. We also, if there's existing industrial, we don't approve new residential within 300 feet of that. So it works both ways.
Yeah, I think of that example down in the industrial park by Spectrum, Time Warner Cable. We had that assisted living or facility went in there, and they had to...
Or my time.
They had to kind of make sure that they were, had 300 feet between the industrial and their facility, because it's a residential use next to industrial.
So it does protect existing industrial uses in that way, where a new residential use couldn't come in within 300 feet of an existing industrial use.
And when you say existing industrial use, you're talking about use as it stands today, not current zoning.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's fair that today we probably would not want a new residential use to come in within 300 feet of I-1 zoning. So say there's an undeveloped I-1 parcel and a residential user wanted to come in within 300 feet of that.
Sure.
As part of their yeah.
So we have undeveloped I-1 parcels here, right?
Yeah, so actually, this area is actually zoned R5 right now, this area, and then this is I-1 right here. So if someone were to come in right here and want a residential development, as part of their proposal, we want them to work with this property owner or acquire the property to the south to change the I-1 zoning to something else within 300 feet of the residential property.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Okay.
Andrew, I noticed when I was looking at the table for the candidate for roadway capital projects, that 37th on the list is Cornhusker Highway from North 20th to North 33rd. But then this was updated, like clear down number 74 and number 75. So I'm just wondering, theoretically, we're going to get to this North 20th to North 33rd Street first. Are they going to take into account these 33rd, the moving of 33rd Street and that kind of stuff?
Paul Barnes, planning staff. So the numbered list that you see there in the LRTP is what we call basically an illustrative list. It's needs-based, and so a lot of times those can shift in number. It doesn't mean that it's a ranking. It's just a numbered list. I think if there's any part of this project that would combine with that, that would be looked at. But that was a standalone and separate project to begin with anyway. So what we did is add on at the end of the list the new North 33rd project.
I guess my only concern was I didn't want that work to be done, and then we're going to come back in and redo it like 2 years later. So, and I'm sure that by adopting this plan, they would then know of this potential realignment of the North 33rd. So if they did do that work, they would take that into consideration.
Right. And I think that's a good point to make and why it's in the LRTP together. That would likely be a state project, work on the highway, and the state's part of, they have representation on the MPO, and so we, continuously communicate about those projects.
So maybe they would stop at like 27th instead of 33rd, so that they wouldn't be redoing work potentially.
That could be a possibility. I think that considering that there are so many needs and projects on the list, that's still quite a few years to come. So I think we have a lot of opportunity for discussion on that.
Okay, thank you.
I think I have one tag question along with what Tracy was asking, because I was curious if it was a prioritized list. And then following along on that, I'd like to know, is there a chance to reorder those projects so that all of the Cornhusker projects could be grouped together? Or is that?
I think that's probably a good question for RTSD in terms of the scope of the project. And we have a good idea of that with the alignments that have been put together. Mm-hmm. If you want a detailed answer to that, I'd probably defer to RTSD.
Okay. I don't think I need a detailed answer today. I was just curious about that, but I also know what their time frame is, and it could be further out than what other projects are. Thank you.
Other questions for Paul or Andrew? Okay, thank you for now. Take testimony in support of both items, by the way. You'll have to state your name again.
It's okay. I still got it. I'm Becky Witt. I'm a business owner, and I've been on this committee. I've worked on this thing for, it seems like, several years. I'm very impressed with the thoroughness and the detail that went into this. I've been well involved in this area. I went to Nebraska Wesleyan a long time ago. I'm older than 2 of the 50 states, but when I went, this area of Cornhusker Highway had a bar about every 400 feet. And that was Cornhusker Highway. And you didn't drive on Cornhusker after 10 at night, or you'd meet Officer Friendly, because they knew why you were there. And I've been in this location, in this area. My business is about ground zero. And it's an auto repair shop, George Witt Service, and I've been there 24 years. And I've watched the neighborhood kind of slide downhill. And then I've watched some come in and, you know, some redo, and it's an every neighborhood that's in transition. And I think it would be wonderful to follow this plan through and beautify this area. And this is a chance to really make a difference in this part of town. And this is a gateway coming in off Interstate 80. This is a very important thing to do. And they've built some beautiful homes nearby, the neighborhood up on the other side of 27th Street. And so you've got some nice areas there, and they need nice places to go. And this whole thing just really makes sense. I wasn't too hot about it in the beginning, but I've been sold. So, do you have any questions for me?
Questions? Thank you again.
Are you welcome?
Thank you.
Testimony in support. Come on up, Bob.
Bob Kozelka at 1935 A Street. I served on the advisory committee representing ProRail Nebraska, which is a rail advocacy group. I'm a trained and graduate in community and regional planning. I'm a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. It was a real joy to sort of get back into active planning to serve on this advisory board, because it was a textbook approach to how to do things. So what you see before you, you know, is perfect planning. Now, it's not perfect planning for a lot of the people behind me who are going to get upset with certain things. But we're looking at something that's as long range as the plan I talked about that I helped develop in 1970, the bicycle plan. It took 40 years to get going. This will take that long. Particularly the Cornhusker Highway aspect is a real plus. If you adopt this in the plan, which you should, to guide things, no longer will you be able to say in Lincoln, north of O Street in a derogatory manner. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Questions? Thanks. Testimony in support.
Hi. Dale Arp, 426 Steel Avenue. Try not to repeat some of the topics here, but I participated in this process as a member of the advisory committee. I witnessed the collaboration and input from its 53 members and the effect those members had as reflected in this plan. The city leadership, administrative consultant, and client teams, the RSTD board members all showed growth in understanding of the current needs and what will add to future value of the sub-area. The work that went into this process resulted in getting meaningful input from the public, also reflected in this plan. Understanding this plan is just a simple, wistful roadmap, albeit with some leverage. I believe it will be a valuable tool to better ensure development over time that citizens can be proud of. I support adding this plan as an amendment to the comprehensive plan, noting that I was also involved with the comprehensive plan development process. Additionally, I was asked to be here by the Great Plains Trails Network as a board member, first joining in 1989. Unfortunately, we didn't have a quorum Monday night, so I couldn't get permission to speak for our membership. But those present were presented the details of the plan, particularly the connections, providing interconnectivity between north and south, the railroad tracks, which basically is divided north and south of the city with respect to the railroad lines and the highway. The board felt that this plan provides adequate opportunities to expand our trail network and expand pedestrian and bicycle traffic north and south of the railroad tracks. Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you for your volunteering.
Other testimony in support? Okay, testimony in opposition. Come on up.
Tracy Von Bush, 1130 Humphrey Avenue. I'll be honest, I was not prepared to come here today to speak, so I'm pretty nervous. We own Virginia's Cafe, right about there under the fish hook. I'll be honest, we were not asked to be a part of the committee to help advise on this situation. I think that there's probably some pretty decent pros for this project. but I really would beg you to look at all the plan options for the roadways. Under this fishhook, there's about 25 low-income housing units at least between our building and the building next to us. There's about 25 units of affordable care or affordable housing that will be gone, as well as a Lincoln landmark, Virginia's Cafe. We're one of the third oldest restaurants in Lincoln, and I would just ask you to weigh all the options of the different plans that they're proposing and take into consideration the businesses that will be affected by the changes.
Questions?
Has Virginia's Cafe always been in that location, in that building?
We have, I might have to confer to my father-in-law. We moved over in 78. His mom started the restaurant. He took over, and we're the third generation. We're hoping to pass it down to our kids, but we'll see what happens in the next couple of years.
Can you tell me why Virginia's would have to go away?
I don't know. I mean, we can try to.
I just didn't. My reading.
I mean, we could try to relocate. It won't be the same. We have parking. We're able to keep our costs low because we own the building. We have affordable housing above us that helps us keep our prices low and helps us keep our customers coming back.
But what in this plan would prohibit you from staying?
The J. We are right here, directly under the J.
Oh, okay.
We're right here. It's actually directly over our building. There are alternate plans that have been proposed, but it appears that those alternate plans are not the favorite. So this is their favorite plan so far from the information that we've gathered, and obviously we're concerned about our well-being.
My understanding is, though, that this is not a final plan.
It is not a final plan, but like I said, it's definitely been earmarked as their favorite, and we've been told that it's their favorite more than once.
Other questions? Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you for being kind on my impromptu.
Testimony in opposition. Come on up.
Mike Bonbush, 5123 Constitution Avenue. I'm also connected with Virginia's Cafe. And with the plan that they've got as their private, I find several problems with it. They've taken a high level or a high volume 37th Street and Adams Cornhusker intersection and eliminated and blocked it off as total no access except over to 40th and the J Street. And the 44th, when they closed that, they looped it back to 48th Street, which is overcrowded already. With the underpass, it's only 2 lane. Most of the traffic would probably end up on 48th Street that goes down Adams that would normally go on through to 37th Street. They have an alternate that connects 37th on over onto 33rd that would be a lot better, a lot more traffic friendly area. And like I said, I'm biased. I'm part of Virginia's Cafe, so I've been there. I'm the generation before these guys. I just think that they didn't consider all the traffic. They took a high volume 37th Street, put it on that little 40-lane hook, 40th Street hook, which is going to put it into make it a high congestion T intersection. It means everybody's going to turn left and go up 40th Street through the residential to Superior rather than fight that Cornhusker. That's all. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Testimony in opposition. Staff questions?
Sure, I have some.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, me too. Go ahead.
If this preferred plan is adopted, right away would have to be purchased for the fishhook or for the J. And so if someone owns their building in that area, the city or whoever is doing this would have to buy them out in order to put the roadway through there. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll defer to Chris with the RTSD
Sure,
to answer
thank
some
you.
of those. While she's coming up, I'll just kind of reiterate that with this specific approval, the sub-area plan isn't approving this alignment. It's just the alignment we're using right now because that's what we have. So just for clarity.
Hi, I'm Chris Humphrey. I'm City of Lincoln employee, but I'm the RTSD project manager for this project. And just to kind of let you know the next steps for this process, I think Andrew did a really good job explaining how we had the planning environmental linkages study, and then we pulled the city in and developed the sub-area plan, which kind of changed the way that we were looking at the transportation alternatives. Currently, there's about 7 alternatives plus the no-build alternative that we have to study. There are federal funds that are anticipated to pay for this project in part. So we have to follow those federal process guidelines. So assuming that the sub-area plan and the corridor enhancement plan are adopted, the RTSD will move forward with our environmental investigation preliminary design phase of this project. And so sometime this spring, we anticipate to have another public meeting, but this time just focused on the different transportation alternatives. And in that environmental process, we're required to look at a variety of different environmental resources, and this is where it gets to be quite the balancing act on determining which alternative we will move forward with. Like Andrew said, we needed to pick one alternative at this time to show at the sub-area plan, so that's what we refer to as our preliminary preferred alternative. If during this environmental preliminary design phase that another alternative is chosen, we will go back, revisit that sub-area plan, and it will come back before you. Some of the different items that we look at environmental are what people consider true environmental items, such as wetlands, hazardous waste sites that might be in this area. And, you know, in terms of like a business like Virginia's Cafe, we'll be looking at the low income or potential minority impacts we would have on this because of the housing, like they mentioned, the economic impacts on the area, relocation of businesses would be another one. And there's just a variety of different environmental resources, and it's really under a transparent public involvement process that we will make these decisions and show how we have a systematic approach to determining what that ultimate configuration will look like. And this is a process that's going to be about 2 to 3 years long for us to determine all the environmental impacts and document them.
By nature, you mentioned the process is systematic, but by nature, with the kind of guidelines you have to deal with, it's very rational, and the system that you actually go through to identify the most preferred after all that analysis, as you said, is transparent, but there will be a lot of backup information about why you chose which alternative and
Yes, it's a very significant process.
Yeah.
Lots of documentation, lots of traffic analysis. There's really no stone that's left unturned during this process.
Right.
I do have a question as a follow-up, because this is an area that I'm very familiar with, having managed a compliance program, and I want to know, are you doing an EIS or an EA?
Well, we're still working with the Nebraska Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration to determine that. That's part of the reason kind of for this next step of having this public meeting in the spring. We're also going to be reaching out to different resource agencies that would be involved in this area. And once we gather a little bit more information, then a decision will be made on that of either an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement. And I guess for those, just
pardon me,
for people that maybe aren't familiar
explain it.
with
moving in jargon, sorry.
It'd be good.
With the NEPA process, there's really 3 different levels. It's the National Environmental Policy Act. So that's our federal guidance that we're under. And under that NEPA umbrella, there's really 3 different levels of environmental documents. categorical exclusions, which don't really have any significant impacts, and that's about 90% of the projects, I believe. The next level up is an environmental assessment, and those are for projects where there's unknown significant impacts. And then there's an environmental impact statement, or an EIS, which is if you will likely have a significant impact to the environmental area. And again, when I say environment, I'm talking about right-of-way impacts, economics, wetlands, hazardous waste sites, impacts to parks and trails. There's a whole bunch of different things that we'll be looking at.
Well, I know the timeframes for doing an environmental assessment, environmental impact statement are significantly different, and the amount of public involvement is significantly different depending upon which of those pathways you end up going down. So I really want to encourage folks who have some concerns to be present at those early meetings before you make the determination of assessment or impact statement. Because I know I've done hundreds of these documents. I understand the process, and I know that not every item is looked at as carefully under an EA as it is under an EIS, and I would just encourage you to make certain that when you're working on environmental justice, that you're looking at economic environmental justice, not just racial.
Yes. And I do want to mention that if people aren't able to make it to the public meetings, if you go to our website, 33rdcornhusker.com, there's a comment section there. My name is on there as well. We are more than happy to go out and meet with anybody one-on-one and talk about the process, talk about the project, the next steps that we'll be doing, and kind of all those decision-making factors that will go into that. But
thanks. Dick.
Chris, would you at some point in time talk with the Virginia Cafe people and
yes.
show them where their input
I was hoping to reach out with them. I just spoke with their commercial neighbors earlier this morning, and we're meeting at 9 o'clock on Friday. So I was going to talk with them that hopefully we'll be able to connect.
You've got KFOR on one side, and you've got Lincoln Tent and Awning on the other side. And
yeah.
So you've got a narrow pathway in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good information. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Okay. I think then we're ready for a motion, if there are no other questions for staff.
Okay, we need to call these separate.
Separate, yes. This would be the comp plan amendment first.
Okay, staff recommendation is for approval of comprehensive plan amendment 18004.
I move approval. Campbell.
Second, Washington.
Discussion.
I actually think as a planning model, this is a very good planning model. I understand that some folks weren't reached out to. I appreciate, Chris, that you're talking with some of those business owners this week. And I would encourage folks to pay attention to the process and get involved, because I do think that overall this is going to do well by Lincoln to give Cornhusker that front door that Lincoln would like to have. And I like that there's a mix of uses planned in the future, both light industrial to sort of maintain what we have now, as well as mixed use going into the future. Thank you.
Others? Anyone? Dick?
I also think the plan is well put together. Obviously, the impact of the Virginia's Cafe is a concern to me. I recognize that this is not an end product. There's a lot of input yet to go into it, but as an overall plan, it's very sound.
Anyone else?
I would agree with that. I think the plan as a whole is strong. I think it addresses additional needs, transportation needs, that really has hampered these intersections for quite a while. With plans like this, there will be pluses and minuses, and that's no different with this plan than with any other plan. One thing that I would love to see is this is a great part of town that does have an industrial flavor to it, that is a very economical part of town in which to conduct a certain kind of business, and I would encourage all parties to continue to take that into consideration and keep it top of mind as this plan moves into implementation. So, thank you to staff for their work.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank everybody. I kind of realized about halfway through when people were coming up and testifying that I didn't thank everyone for their service on the committees, and I want to thank you for that. I do just want to reiterate that this is just a plan right now, so nothing's set in stone, but it's good to have a plan going forward so we can, kind of have an overarching view. In my financial world, this would be a budget, and I like to always tell my students that just because that's what you budget, you usually don't come out exactly right on. So there's still room for change in there, but make sure you get your voice heard and in the process, and I'm sure that everyone will do their best to get your input on that. So I think it's a good, solid plan for Lincoln's future.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. I trust the process. I know these processes are very stringent, and as Sandra said, I think they're worthy of our trust. So just work through it, and I think we'll be okay in terms of the future goal here. I think we're ready to vote.
Okay. Beckius?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Okay, and then staff recommendation is for approval of miscellaneous 18003.
Move approval, Edgerton.
Second, Core.
Ready?
I think we're ready to vote.
Okay. Beckius?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried, 8-0. Okay, moving on. Item 4.3A is use permit 100D to replace the 3 office, medical lots of 53,660 square feet, more or less, with 2 mixed-use buildings, including waivers to parking, building height, minimum lot area, and lighting, and the associated special permit 1629I to amend special permit 1629G to allow a waiver to parking requirements on property generally located at South 27th Street and Pine Lake Road. Staff recommendation on both items is conditional approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed?
I see none. Desi?
Thank you, Planning Commissioners. Desi Redmond, Planning Staff. This is a request to amend a use permit, special permit located at the southeast intersection of South 27th and Pine Lake Road. South 29th Street runs along here. To develop 2 mixed-use buildings that include underground parking with 23,700 square feet of commercial space and 121 dwelling units, instead of what is currently approved for 3 office medical lots of 53,660 square feet. The request includes commercial uses on the first floors and multifamily dwellings on the 1st through 4th floors for both buildings. This is a similar request that was heard in the spring of 2018. So just wanted to provide a little recap with that request. So at the May 9th, 2018 Planning Commission, there was a similar request as what we're hearing today, 2 mixed-use buildings with underground parking. That request was for 135 dwelling units. This is for 121. That request included a landscaping screen along the rear yard setback of 50 to 75%. This proposal includes 100% landscaping screen at maturity. Other waivers, there were a few, one particular that is no longer being requested. That waiver was for residential balconies in the rear yard setback. That is not being requested with this proposal, as balconies are not proposed to encroach into that rear yard setback because there'll be a maximum of 24 inches wide, so therefore they would not encroach into the setback. The other difference is the original height waiver was for a request for up to 65 feet tall, and this today we're for 50 feet tall. There was a motion by the Planning Commission to conditionally approve special permit for the special permit, and that did carry 6-1. There was a motion for denial for the use permit, and that also carried 6-1. The land use files continued on to City Council, so at the August 20th, 2018 City Council meeting, a motion to approve the special permit was made and carried 4-3, same with the use permit. About a week later, the mayor exercised his vetoing power to veto both the special permit and the use permit. So there is nothing in our code that prohibits somebody for reapplying for a use permit or a special permit. There's no 1-year waiting period. The 1-year waiting period only applies to change of zones or text amendments. So the applicant, the property owner, has resubmitted this amendment request. And to back up a little bit further to provide some original history on the property, the zoning was approved for the R3, the O3, and the H4 districts back in 1994. And then in 1996, the original use permit and special permit was approved, and now it's been amended several times since. To touch on kind of the key waivers, there's a parking waivers for both commercial and residential uses. 1 stall per 300 square feet for commercial uses and 1.5 stalls per dwelling unit for residential uses are being requested. This is a reasonable request for a commercial center similar to this. There's been precedent set for this type of waiver for a commercial center that's basically built out. There isn't a high importance to track the parking at this point, because it's already existing, it's already built. Other projects that have the same parking waiver are the South Point, Edgewood Shopping Center, the East Park Plaza, and the Gateway. The residential parking is a reasonable request, as the majority of the dwelling units will be studio or 1 bedrooms. 3 bedrooms are prohibited, which reduces the overall parking count need. The next key waiver is the height waiver. In the O3 zoning district, by right, a 35-foot multifamily apartment can be built. Other allowed uses, such as an office use, building can have an allowed foot of up to 45 feet. And just as a reminder, it is the use that that the planning department is supportive and the comprehensive plan encourages. The height waiver is up for consideration as part of your decision-making process. Other waivers are minimum lot area and light that are being requested. Also wanted to touch on some traffic counts, as I know there's been some concerns for that. We were able to firm up some traffic counts based on the Institute of Transportation Engineers. While any, let me increase this.
Thank you. Thinking of the age of your commissioners, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for reminding me.
There we go.
So while any new building or development would obviously increase traffic, the proposed mixed use will actually generate less daily vehicular trips than the approved office medical use. So you can see currently with what's approved would generate approximately 1,900 daily vehicular trips, which with what's proposed would generate 1,064. So generally speaking, office medical uses generate higher amounts of daily trips than most other uses. Bob Simmering with the Public Works Department is here to answer any specific questions regarding traffic. So with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Go for it.
I'm not sure you're going to know this.
Okay, shoot.
I know that there's other office medical buildings out there already. Do you know how tall they are?
I do not know exactly how tall they are, but by
Are they hitting that 45 mark, or are they significantly lower?
That I could not answer off the top of my head.
Yes,
This area, there, some of our Ridge Plaza is hitting that.
40th and Pine Lake Road. That one I would guess would be hitting it.
Can you also, I'm just having some, and I know that this affects like stuff that's already built out, but can you explain waiver number 8, where it's talking about this 15,000 square feet down to 1,000 square feet?
Sure. So on the site plan, and the applicant might be able to provide a little bit more, but some of these lots that are built in outlots that have parking lot that are already there existing, they're smaller than what is allowed. So I think the minimum lot is required to be 15,000 square feet. They're asking that these lots, while it isn't explicitly put in the plans at this time, that even though they've already been built, that it's just covering the basis that they're okay to exist there in the plan today.
To add a little bit more to that one, because I also wondered what was happening there. Would you mind pointing to an H4 lot?
Just any H?
Yeah,
any
because
H4?
I'm trying to, when they were talking about it, I was like, so are you dividing it up by the section of the building? Are you dividing it up?
Sure, so any of these lots that are directly to the southeast intersection would be in an H4 lot, and actually, let me grab one.
Is part of that parking lot an H? Is the whole parking lot?
This whole parking, yes, is an H. Here, let me.
That's bigger than 1,000.
But it has multiple lots on it. So this is all of the H4.
Okay.
So like this lot right here is smaller than 15,000 square feet, most likely. I mean, I'm just, some of the lots that are already existing in the H4 are smaller than 15,000. And I think the applicant could probably point out exactly which lots they are.
No, I was just trying to get a grasp of that. All right. So that's to codify what's there.
Yes, ma'am.
Tom, are you ready? Are you getting ready to ask a question? Looks like you are. Maybe.
I'm not ready.
I'll have a question
Okay.
in the meantime.
Okay.
I noticed that they're going to put apartments on the first floor, which typically we like commercial on the first floor and then apartments on the upper levels. Does planning staff have any heavy opinions on that one way or the other?
Sure, so there will be commercial on the first floor. I think there will be a significantly low amount of residential on the first floor, so most of it will be commercial.
But really, the way that this is presented to us now, if they wanted to go ahead and do all apartments on the first floor, could they?
Well, they have to substantially comply with the perspectives and drawings that were submitted. And so those drawings do show that they're commercial units, they're commercial bays on the first floor. So I think you could add something specific as a condition if you wanted to cover that. But I think that by making it so they have to comply with the existing drawings, that it's kind of already inferred. But you could definitely add something to solidify it.
I have a question about parking.
Mhm.
I understand the staff's recommendation on the 1 to 300 in the commercial. I see where we've done that across town. But on the residential at 1.5, I'm wondering if visitors were accounted in that. And what do you, I mean, because right now, I mean, you know, I go to visit friends who live in apartments. They have extra spaces for visitors. And, you know, though they're studios and one bedrooms primarily, by the time I calculated out, you know, what portion would have primarily single people or couples or, you know, 2 people, 2 adults and a child in the 2 bedrooms, I looked at that and went, there still could be 200 people living in those apartments. And, you know, I think it would be hopeful if they only had 1.5 cars.
Sure. That ratio takes into account that not everybody would have 2 cars and that would be an average. We have had some other parking waivers that have had similar ratios that in the past that they have seemed to function well. And so we've used kind of this 1.4, 1.75, 1.4 that have in the past shown to work for this type of development.
Can you show me the one that's show me one of the 1.4s and then the 1.75?
Let's 1.4 on the gateway. There's a pre-existing use permit. Gateway here, that was another amendment. 1.4, and then.
But neither one of those have been built yet, correct?
Correct. I think that and history has shown us that that is a ratio that would work for this area. Here's some more that has some similar ratios.
I guess the North Holdridge one would be pretty comparable.
Mm-hmm. Oh. And how many were one bedrooms? 80 of 120?
For this
Oh,
project?
for this proposal?
No, for
This one, the one on the screen.
Highlands. I'm trying to.
Oh, yeah, 80 out of the 120 were one
We got
bedroom.
approved at 1.5. Okay.
Ready?
Is this a, I was trying to pull back the previous proposal from spring. Is this a different configuration of the parking asks waivers than we saw last time?
A different parking configuration.
These two requests are generally outlined per zoning district? 03, but was the original request that way as well?
Yes.
In spring? Okay.
Yep. The parking has not changed. It was the same as the original, or the most recent amendment, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Desi.
Mm-hmm.
I have another question for you, Desi. So I know in the application it says 2 buildings, but really, when I look at it, it looks like 4. Are we counting it as 2 because there's a connector between the 2?
Oh, sorry. Yes, they're connected, so they're considered two buildings. You can kind of see where they're connected here and here. So yes, they are considered 2 buildings.
So a couple questions. So what is the ratio again of the units? I'm looking on my paperwork. Do you recall?
It's 60% would have to be 1 bedroom or studios, and 3 bedrooms are prohibited.
Okay, and then what is the total square foot?
The total square footage of the
Complex.
of the commercial is 23,700.
And then of the whole units, do you know that answer? Like of the buildings? So if you were comparing the medical at 56,000 plus compared to, do we know the total square footage?
There's 12,500 on one and 11,100 on the other.
23,700.
Mm-hmm.
Total.
There you go. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
I want to ask for one more clarification, just
Sure.
to make sure that everyone's on the same page. If this was medical office building, they could go up to 45 feet.
Yes, ma'am.
Once we add that residential, though, it's capped at 35.
Yes. And I have the table here. So this is the section of our Lincoln Municipal Code that shows dwellings in the 03 are capped at 35. All other allowed uses are capped at 45.
Any other questions?
Just for clarification, Desi, the square footages that we were just talking about with Christy, we're talking floor plate.
I believe that's what the
Okay.
question was, correct?
Okay.
No, I was talking about
Total square footage.
Okay, so that
So we're
answers my
talking, so
question.
the answers you gave, 23,700, that's floor plate.
Right, that's the bottom floor,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So I guess you could take that and go up 4 stories,
Sure.
and that would maybe give you your approximate, if that's what you're looking for.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for asking that again.
Thank you.
Make sure I
Clarifying.
understood it, 'cause
Desi, would one, wait a second, so in looking at the height difference between 35 and, yes, sorry. Is it one resident that changes it from a commercial building to an office building to a residential building?
It would be considered a mixed-use building, yeah. By adding that additional use, it would fall under the all other allowed uses.
So once it hits mixed use, then it,
So once it hits having a residential use in it, then it falls under dwellings as the more restrictive.
And Desi, could you remind me the landscaping increase that you'd mentioned up to 100%? Could you remind me the parameters of that requirement?
Sure, so that's, it's not a requirement, it's a condition that's being added.
Sure.
When there is a residential use up against, a non-residential use, we have screening requirements, and that is about 50 to 75%. And so they are proposing to add a 100% screening at maturity. So it will take those plants to grow, but it would be considered 100% landscape screening along the south, just along the south side.
Okay. And then we're just looking at, when we talk about planting, original planting, we're looking at nothing above and beyond city requirements at time of original planting?
At time of, you mean when it was originally,
It would be, let's say this was developed and we put in the landscaping screen, nothing above and beyond than what is required right now, in terms of size of planting.
in terms of size of planting. If I'm understanding correctly, do you mean the size of like the trees that are planted?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, right. It's looked on at a maturity basis.
Sure.
So once it fully matures, yes, I think I understand what you're saying.
Can I interrupt? I think what Tom might be asking, though, is if you look at the planting plan, if I can clarify, I don't want to put words in either one's of your mouth, but
you're the landscape
for example, a shade tree, there's a honey locust shown on the planting plan. I think what Tom might be asking is at installation, that tree goes in at a 1.5 inch caliper. An evergreen, a Douglas firs on the plan, that evergreen would go in at 3 to 4 foot height at installation. Is that what you're asking?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, thank
Not
you.
mature size, but
Right.
what it goes in at the time of planting.
Yeah, when it's installed. Yes.
And no concession for an advanced level of growth at time of installation.
Not at this time. No.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask one more question about the screen? Because I was going to ask this later, but if we're into it now, that's good. When we say 100%, remind us what 100% means in terms of ratio of deciduous, which is trees that lose their leaves in the winter, versus evergreen, which obviously means that they have needles or leaves all year. Is that 100%? That 100% is not all evergreen. It's, as I recall, I think it's 50-50 about, or something like that?
I can't speak to that off of
Okay.
memorization, but we can look that. I can ask
Okay.
Steve to look that up and get that exact.
That
but
would
there
be,
is
that would be great information
Okay.
to have, because obviously a tree that grows tall, that's a deciduous tree, the real screen aspect of that is a trunk, not a full
Right.
width thing. Okay.
Right. Yes, but there is a mix that has to be.
Okay.
Yes,
And I was
sir.
going to ask the question in a different way about, is it 100% year-round or 100% at, in the middle of the summer, full leaf out?
Okay, so
At maturity, at full leaf out, is it 100% or is it 100% year round?
That's a great way to ask that question.
well, it would be year round because, I mean, I guess it would be, I guess, how do you look at this? So.
Or it would be 100%.
That's why it's a great way to ask that question.
Yeah, let us see what the code says specifically, and we can get back to you with some of those answers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Desi.
Thank you.
Other questions? Any other questions? Okay. I think we are ready for testimony from the applicant.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Richard Kruger. I'm the president of Kruger Development and the manager of Southridge Village LLC, which is the applicant here. I want to thank you for your time. And it seems from the discussion, maybe just to do an abbreviated presentation, go to more of the technical aspects of this. Okay, let me put this down. This was from May of 2013, is that? Oh, okay, so this was the reform process that the city was going through back when Marvin was here. And this is from 2013, and it talks about trying to allow for more residential uses in mixed-use developments. Okay, that's what it was for. And it allows for more residential uses in commercial zoning districts, allow residential uses on the first floor of commercial buildings, and allow residential uses in H2 and H4 business districts. And there's our site. There's our site. That is the genesis of this proposal. And over the last several years, I've worked with staff to try and come up with something to meet as many, make as many wins as possible for as many people as we can. So that has brought us to this point again. Now, I'll just focus on the things that have changed since our other application. After the commission voted against this application, we didn't have any conditions, there was no conditions imposed, so all we could kind of work on was what the discussion was at that time. So on the way to City Council, we pulled back our initial application. We took off one floor, that's 14 dwelling units, so we reduced the density. That brought everything down to 50 foot in height. Commissioner Shearer had talked about landscaping, so we immediately went to the 100% landscaping. And at this point, in regards to the tree landscaping, probably not many people know this, but Southridge Village is and has been for almost 20 years now part of the Nebraska State Arboretum. So we don't put in miniature trees. We put in more advanced trees when we do our plantings. Now, in regards to and I'll just put something up for the dozens of people that are watching at home.
Maybe dozens.
Seems generous.
Yeah, you're being generous. Ratings are not that good.
Okay. So these trees that are in the back that abut our immediate neighbors, those are trees that our designer pulled off of from the city website in terms of approved trees in the city of Lincoln. And beyond me just telling him, go ahead and get to that 100%, I couldn't tell you much about them except they're a mix of deciduous and coniferous trees. And so that's what we're proposing here. By the way, this is the building that we took the floor off. We took those 14 units off of that floor right there. In regards to parking, as this site is maturing and we can know kind of, well, let me back up. H4 zoning allows a broad mix of uses. So you got everything from restaurants to banks, exercise centers, PetSmart, you know, all these kinds of things. And it used to be that each one of these uses had their own designation for traffic counts, and we've been trying to keep everything up to date, and that's been a problem. So the idea was to just go to 3 per 1,000. This space is, except for this 3.5 acres, is completely built out, and it's very stable in terms of our parking. Part of this application will be rehabilitating a couple of our detention cells. I'll put this one up here. This is Duto, by the way. This is our site that we're referring to. So there's a detention cell right here, and there's a detention cell right here. That those will be rehabilitated as we move forward. We have a pipe that will come along the backside of this to carry the surface drainage and some portion of the roof drainage that will come along here. We've had 3 of the neighbors contact us about trying to have access because they have some soggy conditions in the back, wanting to tap that, and we've agreed to allow that to happen if we're approved. Oh, by the way, you had asked about, the question was in the discussion about the 10,000 square foot per lot. And so some of these up in here are divided into maybe 1,700 square foot lots, and they're banked together. This is similar to what was done out at Lincoln Trade Center and other parts of Lincoln. This particular one right here is only about 4,500 square foot. And the notion here is that all these parking lots are on outlots. All of this is on an outlot. And so they flow together. They kind of pulse forward and backwards. And so it's not like you have a lot and you have 10 parking stalls for your use and that's it. And so we don't get into the parking wars that has happened on certain other sites. So this has been done in several mixed areas around town. I hear the buzzer beating, so...
you can take a couple more minutes.
Okay. I have a couple things to hand out, additional information. We... coming into that planning commission last time, there was questions on existing parking, whether there was enough existing parking, and we've gone around at different times of the day and done an actual count, and this is all in the parking behind what we call the PetSmart building. So that would be the parking most directly affected by this application. And you can see that we've never had less than 100 open stalls during any of those times. Also, I'm passing around the letter that we got from the traffic engineer that refers to the PM trips and how this mixed-use development reduces the amount of trips that are allowed if we go to an office medical use. So I wanted to put those into your hands. So the key thing as we developed this whole plan in talking with staff, probably the prime directive was to maintain the open space between us and the neighbors that immediately abut us. In this, I've got it upside down here. So this green area that you see there, that's a little bit of an acre, a little bit over an acre that we are going to maintain on this site as open space between us and the neighbors. That's the key element that everything was designed around. And in order to get to that, we need to put the underground parking in. In order to get the underground parking, we need a certain level of density. And that's what's driving this whole effort, is to maintain that openness. The openness that we're maintaining, as you can see from the exhibit, is greater than what the existing rear yards are today. And so I just wanted to put that out there for everyone to understand as we go forward in this discussion. I know there are other people that want to talk, and unless there's any questions, maybe I'll just sit down at this time.
Is all the parking that's required for this underground?
No, we are adding, in fact, I'll put this back up. This darker gray area that you see in here, those are all additional stalls that we're adding. Underneath these buildings, each one of them have 52 dwelling unit, or 52 parking stalls.
Okay.
Okay, so it's 104, and another, I should have reviewed this. I think there's probably another 68 or so that are surface parking that's added to the existing parking that we have there today.
So when I did the math to determine how many parking spots you need though, so you're part of the parking that's tied up in the footage math as well as the number of dwelling units.
Mhm.
So looking at that, so part of that comes from parking that's already there for the building behind it, for the
Yes.
building in front of it.
Yes.
Okay, so you're not adding 260 new spots.
No, we're adding about 170,
Okay.
175. I would refer to staff or
Sure, sure.
engineering on that point. Now, I hasten to add that this is all on private property, so we can assign stalls if we need to.
Other questions? Tracy? Anyone else? Thank you.
Okay.
We'll start with testimony in support. This is testimony in support for both items that are related.
Excuse me.
Good afternoon. My name's Keith Dubas. I'm an architect working with Rick Kruger on this project. Just a couple of, to reiterate, this plan is compliant with the comprehensive plan in terms of bringing residential units closer to commercial centers that can serve residents, reducing the number of traffic trips between residents and the needs that they have for daily living. Providing multifamily housing next to commercial services like restaurants, bookstores, grocery stores, coffee shops helps to reduce the footprint that we have on automobile traffic. The developer, Rick, has a record of building quality projects with rates of high occupancy in his apartments. The materials that we're using on the building are quality materials, brick and stucco, long-lasting materials, not like some of the materials you see now being used in student housing projects around town. And the number of traffic trips are reduced by the fact that people can walk to these services rather than having to drive to get into their car and drive to the grocery store or to their coffee shops. So, the plan as it's shown meets with the ideas of new urbanism, and that's reflected also in the comprehensive plan.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Testimony in support. Did you have a question?
No, the 3 o'clock break if you were wanting to.
Yes.
Okay, that's okay.
We're gonna take a 10-minute break, and at 3 o'clock we'll start with testimony in opposition then. But there's no more testimony in support. I don't see any hands or anything, so we'll take a 10-minute break, start again at 3 o'clock, and then start with testimony in opposition. Thanks. Okay, we'll resume, and again, we'll start with testimony in opposition. And this is for both the use permit and the special permit, testimony on both. Testimony in opposition.
Hi, I'm Jane Peak. I live at 2841 Porter Ridge Road, and I'm the president of the Porter Ridge West Townhouse Association. You're familiar, I'm sure, with the history of this project and our objections to it. This is the property as it is now. I don't know, can you see it?
It'll come up.
It'll come.
And this is the lot. As you can see, they want reduction in parking, but from this picture, all of this parking is pretty much filled with the parking behind the building as well as being used right now, and there's nothing else in there to use it. The mayor vetoed resolutions A91223 and A91222 because per his press release, this project continues to create conflict with the adjacent residential townhouses. And might I add, the entire neighborhood and those who work there, as evidenced by the 197 signatures that we got on an informal petition that we did just this month in the cold to protest the 50-foot height waiver or increase and the reduction in parking. And I can tell you that the minimal changes that Mr. Kruger has made has done nothing to reduce this conflict. Why do we have zoning restrictions? To reassure that standards are maintained, provide some consistency with design and purpose are complementary and compatible with the surrounding area. I'm not so sure any longer. If the restrictions can be easily altered as this specific instance, then why bother? It seems to us that the planning department and the mayor are even more excited about imposing this huge mixed-use project on a small, difficult-to-access piece of property than Mr. Kruger himself. He has stated at the May 9th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting that in the 2014, the Planning Department started a process called reform, which he referred to before, which he believed was at the heart of allowing an increased density. This site was specifically called out, as he mentioned, to add residential to commercial district. We think this area is densely populated enough. This is a 1 mile radius from this little piece of property here that we're discussing today. Everything is developed. All the red are apartment buildings. The others are townhouses and like Clark Jury and Savannah Pines. In my mind, these illustrations reflect the areas for which mixed-use buildings were intended, on arterials with sidewalks and located in areas with a need for housing, such as the Haymarket area. This is 48th and Holdridge, where 48 Square on 48 is. This is the new project at 48th and Layton. This is near the Nebraska East Campus, Wesleyan University. The old Valentino's project is just to the west of that. It should not be forced onto any vacant piece of property in an established neighborhood close to shopping. Why should we be the guinea pigs for this type of infilling? This area is far too congested as it is. In order to qualify as mixed use, Mr. Kruger is using only half the first floor as commercial space, with the rest of the first floor and 3 additional floors in apartments. Just enough commercial space to allow 45 foot in height as opposed to 35 feet if it were strictly apartment building. He wants to reduce the parking requirements to accommodate this large project on a small space by stating the mixed use is providing an environment for individuals to utilize city transportation as well as other alternate transportation other than automobiles. The demand for parking will be minimized. How ludicrous is that? How many people do you know that can afford a rent starting at $900 a month for an efficiency, which is what Mr. Kruger has stated, and does not own an automobile? It is not exactly affordable housing, which is exactly what the city needs. He wants to reduce the requirements for multifamily dwelling units to 1.5 stalls per unit. How many couples do you know that do not have one automobile each to require parking accommodations? Even though it may be one-bedroom unit, if there's a roommate in one form or another, there will be 2 cars per unit. We feel this misconceived rationale is strictly to accommodate this small piece of land, and we request the reduced parking requirements to be denied. And I may go over, I apologize. We're not standing in Mr. Kruger's way of making this property profitable. He stated at the May 9th commission meeting that as far as office space, we have nothing to rent. This is a successful subdivision. At the December 13th meeting that Mr. Kruger held with his latest iteration of this project, he distributed an illustration of a commercial project he said he could build right now with no waivers. Those in attendance said they loved it. 16 of the 17 property owners abutting this project returned a survey indicating the commercial project is their preference. Only one property owner has not responded. This would consist of 2 45-foot high commercial buildings with a road just on the other side of the fences. We wouldn't see the road because of our fence, nor would these buildings intrude on our privacy 24/7 as apartments would, and they provide more open space even if it is for parking. Although we purchased our homes, this shows the road that would be right on the other side of our fence. Although when we purchased our homes, we thought these buildings would be lower in profile and similar to his buildings just to the east of South 29th. These are the roads right next to the private properties and the buildings, commercial buildings. Mr. Kruger and the planning department think this is so nice that there would be over an acre of green space. However, we wouldn't see much of it, if any. This is a picture of Mr. Gerlach taken from his deck. He's out 40 feet from his fence line. This is where the building would be constructed, and this is how much green space we would see. Little to none. Some have said this would be a nice buffer for the neighborhood. There's no way that these huge buildings will be anything to the neighborhood but a wall. We always thought that the townhouses were the transition to the neighborhood from the commercial area. We know what it's like living next to commercial area. We've lived with it and its traffic for 20 years. This is what it would look like. This is only a 3-story apartment building, so you can imagine another story above that and how that's going to separate the neighborhood. If I may quote Mr. Leicester's letter of opposition, some on the council believe that the developer was to be praised for making compromises, but we point out that the developer was the one who initially made the plan, then has abandoned it and wants to have his 3rd and 4th waiver from the zoning requirements. It's the residents who should be respected by the council and their reliance on what would be built next door when they chose to locate their homes there. We believe the developer has betrayed a promise, and compromising his plan was not particularly praiseworthy. We respectfully ask that you deny use permit 100D and special permit 1629I and all that is associated with it. We ask nothing more than you retain the zoning that is in place right now.
Thank you. Are there questions?
Thank you.
Jean, if you could rank your concerns, which would be your number one concern? You know, would it be the parking? Would it be the traffic? Would it be the height?
It's the apartments and the intrusion on our property. We purchased our properties with the knowledge that it was going to be commercial. We understood that there would be some concessions on our part to be made. But to have 4 stories of apartment buildings looking in our bedrooms and our living rooms 24/7, I think is over the limit.
Okay.
And as you can see on his illustration that he gave us at his meeting, there's much more open space for us, even if it is parking. It's not going to be a wall from one end of our properties to the west end of our properties.
And can you put up go back to the very first picture you put up there? Yeah, okay.
This is the property taken, or this is the lot taken from, this is his detention pond down here, so this is from the west. They talk about the difference in elevation. There's not that much difference in elevation. He talks about always the ones at the east end, but it's flat at the west end, so we're going to have 4 stories of apartments above us. And I don't mean us, me. I don't live on that side of the street. I mean my association. As you can see, there's considerable concern with this project. Sure. And it's not just us, it's the entire neighborhood. We've walked the entire Porter Ridge West neighborhood, hundreds of houses. We got more signatures in May because it was warmer and maybe we spent more time doing it at that time, but we're committed enough that we did it again this month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
I'm going to leave a picture here that he wanted.
That's fine. Okay, we'll continue with testimony in opposition.
Is that the one you wanted?
Hello, everybody. I'm Ron Olds. I live at 2854 Lawson Drive. I'm a member of the Townhome Association that Jane represents. I live on Lawson Drive, which is 1 block to the south of the immediately impacted townhomes. We could have a show of hands of how many people are here in opposition.
You should.
Actually,
that's actually a good thing to do.
If you would, please.
Okay.
Thank you. May I ask among the commissioners, how many of you have been out there to look at the property in question? Then you have some idea.
Out there in May before the snow, so I think that counts for something too.
Okay. Well, just subtract 5 inches from what you see now, and it's still the same way. Okay. Our association is comprised of 57 units and is 94% owner occupied. Of the 17 units abutting the project, that is right along to the south of the proposed apartments, and I'm going to refer to them just as the apartments because I think there's a minimal amount of commercial space in these buildings. I have not gotten a clarification on the 23,700 square feet compared to the total project or even compared to the total first floor square footage, but that's for somebody else to worry about. Okay, of our 17 units abutting that, the 2019 property tax assessments range from $194,700 per unit to $258,000 and a little more. Now, he has a development over on 16th Street, the Chanticleer Apartments that were built behind a row of 18 townhouses. Of those townhouses, 68% are rentals. And their 2019 assessments range from $148,600 to $207,600. This reflects values 20 to 24% less than our current values. Obviously, the effect this development will have on our property values is a concern to all of us, and not just us in the townhomes. There will be a ripple effect because of using comparables. When properties start to sell along the backside, we believe they will not reap the amount of value that they should have because of this encroachment. And so as the comparables affect all of us, no matter what street we're on, it's going to spread through the entire development out there, I believe. Any decrease in resale value of the adjoining townhomes will ripple down to those of us not backing up to these colossal buildings. And I say colossal buildings, they're honestly 1 story shorter than Shields. At 50 feet, I understand Shields is at 65. So add 1 more floor and you're basically at Shields.
You could have a Ferris wheel.
We could. I feel like we're on a merry-go-round right now because this is like Groundhog Day. We were here before, weren't we? Mr. Kruger has stated that he would be happy to own any of the abutting properties because he would rent it out. He's also stated that 4 of the abutting units are already rentals. However, I've been told that 3 of those property owners plan to return to their townhouses when their individual circumstances permit. And I've also been told that of the one person that is actually in a rental property, he's disappointed by this development because he moved to our neighborhood to get away from a similar one. Now, I don't want to disparage those who rent homes, but when a home is not owner-occupied, there's a strong possibility that the occupant will not have the same incentives to maintain the property and try to be a good neighbor to the surrounding homeowners. We also have a gap in communication. We communicate by email a lot in our townhome association, and I know that the renters that are among us aren't getting any of our concerns, updates, and so forth. There's a gap because of an absentee property owner. I can tell you from my own personal experience, this was the case with the townhome my son owned and lived in Northwest Lincoln. By the time he moved, he and 2 other homeowners were the only owner occupants out of about 30 units. Just 10% by that time were owner occupied. He sold and moved because he just couldn't stand the neighborhood anymore. In conclusion, I'd like to point out that this is a great neighborhood right now. By adding these 2 proposed monoliths, which are too tall, too incongruous, too intrusive, too invasive of our privacy, and which we believe will result in too large an increase in traffic and parking problems, I ask you to oppose this project. Thank you for your time and consideration. Are there any questions?
I don't see any. Thank you.
Before you kick me out, there you go. How close to 100% screening would you say those trees are right now? And how many years will it take before it's somehow considered 100% screening? Thank you all.
Thanks. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Debbie Hoft. My husband and I own a townhouse at 2846 Porter Ridge Road, and I'm a first-time community activist, so. But I'm going to talk about a couple of other aspects to consider regarding this proposal. As I understand the 2040 Comprehensive Plan, its purpose is to offer strategies for how a city can intelligently accommodate growth and do so, quote, in a way that preserves and enhances our quality of life. It is based on projections for population growth and where and how people might want to live by then. Projections, a lot of people projected the Huskers would win at least 6 games last year. Projections are sometimes a little off. This proposal is attractive to the city because of its mixed-use designation. Mixed-use buildings sound wonderful, especially in areas in big cities where the population is already dense. But this particular location does not seem to me to be ideal. It is a narrow strip of watery land in a parking lot behind a busy strip mall. Apartment tenants will have to walk across busy parking lots and a Starbucks drive-through to get anywhere, especially to the entrances of the businesses of the strip mall. You got to walk all the way around those buildings to get to the front. If we're going to catch a city bus, that's going to be pretty treacherous as well. You have to cross busy Pine Lake Road to get all the way over to South Point Mall, and that's going to be a little hard to do at times, plus all those parking lots. In fact, walking just about anywhere in that area will be tricky if one has to cross either 27th Street or Pine Lake Road. Anyone who has driven in the area knows how busy these roads already are. Now add 200 more people living right there. Secondly, there is no guarantee that there are enough commercial businesses that would find this particular location attractive. It will be hard to find, hard to get to, hard to park, and hard to compete with the large variety of already established businesses in the area. 48th and Holdridge is very attractive and yet has not had great success in filling its mixed-use building. I don't think the city should take a huge risk that this building in this particular location would be any more successful. This developer may just end up with a 50-story, or 50-foot, 4-story mixed-use building in name only. And the other point about the difference in square footage, if he builds the office or medical use building at 53,000 feet and how many cars will come and go. That's only if he builds buildings of that size, which you have that kind of traffic. So there's no guarantee that that would happen. Thirdly, as the 2040 Comprehensive Plan points out, infill projects should, quote, ensure expansions are in scale with the adjacent neighborhood, are properly screened, fulfill a demonstrated need, and are beneficial to health and safety. I don't believe this project achieves any of these goals. This is not the right fit for this land, and it does not preserve and enhance quality of life. My main point is this. If you believe the people of this neighborhood are correct and vote no on this proposal, the developer can still develop the area with a more acceptable and appropriate plan, and the neighborhood still thrives. If you vote yes and the proposal goes through despite our objections, several negative and irreversible outcomes are quite possible. Please don't let that happen. I thank you for your time.
Thanks. Questions? Thank you.
Some pretty good speakers. Hard act to follow. My name is Doug Gerlach, and I live at 2834 Porter Ridge Road. And I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the Planning Commission today. My wife and I have invited the mayor, the city council, and the Planning Commission to come out to our home so you can get a clear picture of why we're objecting this. The invitation still stands. We haven't been contacted by anybody. I've got questions and bullet points. If this project takes so many special permits, how can you be sure this is the right thing to do? I'm here today to help you understand our point of view from the people that live there. We're on the front line of this thing, okay? What are rules if we don't follow them or enforce them? Make no mistake, this is all about money, okay? And his statement clarified that. He flat told us, I could put in business, but I make a lot more money with apartments. And that's good for him. But we don't believe that. Those are his words, not mine. Think of it this way. If you own a business and you have to rewrite your complete handbook to accommodate one employee, are you going to do that? No. That's what we're doing here. We're rewriting the Lincoln zoning handbook for one person. Nobody else wants it. None of the other employees want to go along with this, but we're going to change the rules for somebody, one person. And to date, we've been involved in this well over a year. I have not found one person, personally, that's in favor of this. There's no reason that we need to cram apartments and buildings into this small, odd tract of land. I'm in sales, and I drive this city all day, every day. And I see empty office space and apartments, and I'm like, glad I'm not paying for that. Why, if this is an alley. If you guys have been out there, this is an alley. If this is such a hot location, the 24-hour fitness is still sitting empty. Why is that not filled? I can tell you why. Because this is an alley. That's all it is, folks. This is the employee entrance and the loading docks for the businesses that face Pine Lake Road. This is not spacious office surroundings or luxurious living. It's an alley. And it will always be an alley. This was never intended to be residential housing. We knew that when we bought this place. So no matter what you call this, it's still going to be an alley. Whatever you put there, it's still going to be an alley. My wife just lost her job, and we're probably going to move to Omaha. But now, there's a big yellow sign that says zoning, not too far from our for sale sign. Who's going to buy a home when they have no idea what's going to raise its head on the north side of that fence? We were told it was going to be a commercial building, that it was going to be just like the ones that are there, and we're good with that. But we didn't know what Kruger's next plan was going to be, so we wondered. Is it going to be more doctor's offices, hair salons? Maybe he's going to plant trees, call it Kruger Woods, with curvy walkways where parents can take their kids for a walk. Turn it into a community. Nope, excuse me. We're going to put an out-of-place building that nobody wants. Nobody wants this. Just one person. So who do you go with? You guys make the decision. You go with the community who objects to this and who's going to have to deal with this the rest of our lives, or the developer who lives across town and don't care or how it affects the community. He's just a guy picking up the check. We had over 225 people, first time around. Jane and the guys got 197 the last time. You've got copies of all that. I can assure you there's a lot more than 200 people that are going to be affected by this. Rick decided to have a meeting with the mayor, okay? And that's cool. We weren't invited. After the meeting that he had, because he's going to work with the community, he sent out 17 letters. The whole community, 17 only. Let that sink in. He flying under the radar? Maybe. We don't know. I can't judge what's in his heart. I know I'm probably out of time, and I haven't even gone into the traffic issues, but this is not good for our community. Please, don't vote for this. If you have got any questions, I'll try to answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have nothing to say. I'm just going to get my pictures.
Hi there, again. My name is Jane Hansen. I live at 2829 Porter Ridge Road here in Lincoln. I'm glad to see you all again. We thank you for your help last time. 6-1 was a very nice vote in our favor in support of us not having a wall built to divide our community and where we live. And you hear that word community over and over again. We really are. And I apologize for all the emails that you've been getting regarding this project, because I heard that you had a lot of trouble even having the staff to get them uploaded so people could read them. So we thank the community for their interest. We thank our people that are here today to talk to us. I'm going to read. You know, they say that as you get older, time telescopes. I know that it seems like just yesterday that we were here to see you. It was actually 9 months ago. We are almost on a first-name basis, and with your faces so familiar, I might think the next time I see you at Hy-Vee that I know you. We should probably have sent you all Christmas gift baskets to keep this relationship flowing smoothly and to keep you on our good side.
That would be bad.
We'll do that next time. We're hoping not to do this again, please. This is more of this. Being here could cause butterflies, nausea, and I've actually forgotten to take some critically important medicines twice this week because of all the phone calls, writing, and general support of this community. This really can't go on. Okay? The lost sleep is not so much the fear of visiting you. This is us. I don't know, does it go on automatically, you said? Okay. The lost sleep is not so much the fear of visiting you for me, but a general fear of losing the community. Some outrage that the people appear to be immaterial to Mr. Kruger, and even a natural fear of the unknown. If these buildings are built, my neighbors across the street will rent or sell their homes. Home values for all of us will fall, as will rental value, and the neighborhood culture will shift. We tried to address the fear last time by showing you true representation of the elevations of the buildings. And this line right here is the sight line from our balconies on the side that's facing the proposed buildings, okay? Fear is difficult to overcome for most of us, and the confrontation is terrifying, but we're tired of losing sleep, and we're worrying about the destruction of our neighborhood. Although I'm really most nervous about convincing you of the impact on my neighbors. Fortunately, so I'm here. And all of us got our gumption together. I teach at UNL, and one of the things I notice as the semester passes are events like my Rwandan students seeing snow for the first time. Just the general journey of life that we all experience progresses as one gets older. The familiar things and even time becomes more precious and brings along with it many physical challenges that you may not be able to fathom. A sense of purpose fades, a feeling that you really don't care if you don't know what Instagram is, and, well, tweeting sounds somehow improper. It will come for you too. Each day you seize each day urgently to live at best and give back your best. That's the Nebraska way. That's the way we are. None of us here lives in a mansion. The city just upgraded our values to almost $250,000 for many of us. They're going to insist on taxing us that rate even as our property values plummet. And it'll create a lot more headaches and hassles for us to come out and battle them. Maybe we'll be back with you again. Who knows? At least we'll know who you are now. That helps. Each one of us has a home on the ridge. When we return there each night, we go to replenish our bodies and, yes, our souls. We make sacrifices every day to stay there and to prosper, like little patches of Edelweiss, okay, that survive somehow in that environment. In other states like Colorado, you might have to consider the impact on the ability of that strip mall to install and use solar panels successfully. That's a fact. Who in their right mind would rent an apartment that backs up against a concrete wall block? $900, complete with loading docks, the Starbucks line, dumpsters for all 9 restaurants in the strip mall, and the other inhabitants, rats and foxes. The answer is only those who cannot afford better housing. Quick picture, Union Bank building. Look at the double parking lot between them and all of the coniferous trees that are put there against the back. Here's somebody. I don't know what happened to him, but he didn't get in on the coniferous trees. Here's the picture we were talking about with the back of Shields, and they have a nice little brick wall. They have all these coniferous trees, in addition to which they have another easement on the other side that has a walking trail. And oh yeah, like a picture like Jane showed you, they've got this rearing over their back wall. But that's a good 40, it's probably 70 or 80 feet to that. So Starbucks, I had a neighbor who insisted I tell you this. He can't even take his stroller down to go down to Starbucks from where we live. At this point, Starbucks had 955 people pass to their customers on a Tuesday midweek in January. They had 1,100 customers come through on January 5th, okay? The water, have a swale in the back of my house, huge drainage ditch that was put in right after most people bought their home. Mega destruction, all connected to the city's sewer system. The swale, when we get a 3-inch rain, the water can almost come up to my basement. We get a 5-inch rain, we're bailing. The people who live down below have water coming onto their back patios. Okay, we're about to call out the help. I had to spend $3,000 last year to rip up my basement floor because the drain tile was not coping with all the water that comes down through that soil. There are artesian springs there that were known about when they built those houses. Everything to the west drains to Salt Creek. So the light is also mentioned as a light pollution. They talk about eternal cross-lighting. That's going to look right across into people's lights right here coming from the parking lots. And we don't have a high wall like they have over there by Shields. We don't have any measurements or anything like that. There are so many negatives with this plan. Between the water, that it was so grave that he had to hire an engineering firm and do a bunch of extra work on this. And yeah, I know he has to put the work in, he has to put the money in, but that's what contractors do, and they make big bucks for it, and they make up for it on the other side. I'm not angry. I'm just tired of this. Won't you please give us a break and try to give us this boost? I know we're going to city council, and we're getting ready, but it would help if you help them realize that this, and recognize this is not a good idea. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we will go to staff questions. Any staff questions? Yes, we have staff questions.
I have an answer for that landscape screen.
For the screen?
Yep. So at least 50 up to 75% has to be coniferous, and it's based on a design spread of all of the plants. And also, we have a planner that reviews all the landscape plans, and he has reviewed the submitted ones today, and he said that it would comply with 100% screen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? I think,
Oh,
I don't think you're done.
I don't think you're done.
I don't think you're done.
Okay.
That was slick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You almost got it.
Ask away, please do.
Let's start, go ahead.
Desi, can you tell me, what's the possibility of this developer or a future developer who might own this to change use in the future?
To change the use, so,
It's, right now the proposal is commercial with residents stacked on top. Could they remove the commercial in the future?
yeah, they can come in and apply for amendment. Depending on what they're amending, like a use, they would have to go through a full amendment process. So they'd have to come back and do this again.
Would they go through the amendment process if they were going from, I mean, I want to just clarify. So it sounds like they would go through the amendment process if they went from commercial and residential to all residential.
Correct. So what they're getting, what they're approved for today, for an example, is medical office. They're asking to change that use to residential and commercial. So if they wanted, let's say if they did get approval for that and they wanted to change back to office medical, I believe they'd have to go back through the full amendment process.
So even if they wanted to go to full office medical, they'd have to go through the process, not just increasing the residents and getting rid of the commercial.
Not just increasing the resident, right, because currently they would only be approved for 121 units. So if they wanted to increase the number of units, right, they couldn't do that without going back through an amendment.
And would they have to go through an amendment process if they had someone who wanted a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom and they wanted to combine apartments?
Right, because currently 3 bedrooms are prohibited, so they wouldn't be able to do that without amending the use permit again.
Okay.
Anyone over here?
Desi, I'm not sure if you're gonna know, but, so I know last time, came to Planning Commission, went to City Council, they changed some things in between there. I know one of them was they removed 1 floor. Were there any other changes between?
Sure. So currently, basically what you are all reviewing with this is what they proposed at City Council.
Okay, thank you.
So it's basically exactly the same.
Mm.
In terms of the amount of units, in the height, it is, at the City Council, there was not any prohibition on the patios in terms of their depth. So part of what, when Rick went back through the process, was they are basically only 2 feet deep. They don't allow for any chairs. They don't allow for anybody to sit out there. In the previous proposal, they asked to have the decks, patios, extend into the rear yard setback. So that was the difference between what you have in front of you now. That is a difference between the City Council. There's also private proposals Mr. Kruger has made to the adjacent residents, but they're not a part of what is in front of you.
I'm sorry.
And then Tom.
On the balconies, reducing them to 24 inches, that's only on the south side, right? Not the east.
Correct. It's
side.
only on
I don't
the
know if there are balconies on the west side of the building.
There are on the north side, but it would only be on the south side that it would be a maximum of 24 inches. Yes, and so with that maximum, they don't encroach into the rear yard setback.
Okay, thank you. Pardon me, Tom.
No, not at all. Actually, I didn't know if this might be a question for Director Carey, or Steve or what have you, just because of the length of tenure here. Can we talk a little bit about the reform proposal and recommendations?
David Carey with the Planning Department.
Could you, Director Carey, just give us a high-level overview of the idea of the proposal or the recommendation to implement more mixed-use development into neighborhoods and any potential tie-ins that reform may have given us in terms of implementation into existing neighborhoods?
Okay. I'll answer and discuss that perhaps in a slightly different way than how you asked the question. Okay. The reform effort was, and some of you were around for that, some of you probably were aware of it but not involved in it, but it was a multi-year effort to discuss initially pretty generally the topic of potentially changing how, what type of projects can be approved in our community, mainly in commercial areas, emphasizing mix of uses, and then we also had a large part of that discussion involving design standards for buildings, for sites, for streetscapes, for the public right-of-way. All that was part of that discussion. And so for those that do not recall, what happened with that is that we had a multi-year discussion. We had multiple committees working on that. We did not quite get it to the finish line from our perspective. And so parts of that effort have kind of been waiting or sitting, that has not moved forward. Some parts of that, in a more of a piecemeal way, those that made the most sense have come forward at different pieces and parts. And so a more recent one that you've actually seen, which will be acted on in some form or fashion next Monday at the council, is the landscaping and screening for parking lots in general. So that's just an example of some of the parts that have come forward. The part that I'd like to point out for everyone is that the topic of mix of uses actually is already in our comprehensive plan. So that is not a topic that has been suspended, or the idea of doing that or trying to get more of that to happen. That's already part of our guide from the comprehensive plan. And so the staff perspective on a project like this one, it starts with a mix of uses is what we'd like to see more of, including an increase in density in areas that make the most sense for that type of a project to happen. So that's kind of the perspective from the staff perspective going into a review like this.
Okay. Reform specifically then did not give any sort of, or reform didn't touch upon any sort of proposed changes to heights, setbacks, anything like that in terms of a mixed-use development?
It did.
Okay. Could you?
Yes.
Could you? A high level.
Thank you. High level.
I do not expect you to recall the specific heights, but could you speak a little bit to that?
So there were aspects of that package that was discussed that dealt with the potential for increase of height for buildings, if there was a mix of uses, if it was in the right district and type of layout, and then talking about a couple of different things. One would be a step back proposal, which would be how the setback from adjacent property, especially residentially zoned property, how that would be handled if the increase in height was to happen. And then very specifically, we talked about how we would be discussing an increase of the screening in those situations. That aspect of that proposal is part of this proposal, actually, the increase in screening to try to soften the impact of an increase in height, increase in density next to residential areas.
Okay. And then, and I don't know if this is a question for you or for Desi. I know in the past we've had discussions about the zoning generally on the four corners and how we see commercial, office, residential buffering out from the hard intersection, the hard corner intersection of 27th and Pine Lake. Is my interpretation of that is that the O3 zoning is serving as a buffer between commercial and the residential. Is there an interplay that you may talk to or discuss when we see older zoning implemented with an idea of a mixed use in this particular circumstance, and how planning goes about rectifying or working through those parameters? I know it's pretty vague. I apologize.
I'll take a stab at that, and Desi might want to clean up what I say a little bit. When it comes to the stepping down in intensity concept, yes, we've tried to employ that. There isn't necessarily a hard rule, and some of the harder rules are when we're talking about incompatible uses, such as we were discussing a little bit earlier, heavy industrial next to residential. Sure. Obviously, that's a much more severe situation. But we do try to employ kind of that step down from the most intense into, all the way up to, single-family residential. That does not mean that we have hard and fast rules where you can or cannot or always can do certain things. That's more of a guide, a way to look at it.
Sure.
When it comes to mixed-use areas, and this is an area of planning and development that we haven't had a lot of that in Lincoln, other than in the downtown area. Now, we've had some of those projects that happen outside of downtown now, so we're starting to get more of it.
Sure.
Part of the reason why the staff position on this is supportive of that concept of mix of uses is that we're trying to have more of that happen, and we want to see how they work. But at the same time, we're still being careful with the locations. We're trying to make sure that we're not obviously creating a problem. I think within that discussion, there's some gray area, as we know, with the neighborhood that is in opposition of this proposal, because it is a different type of mix of uses on one site than what is typical for Lincoln. But from our perspective, we are looking at it as an opportunity to try to get some more of that to happen here. So that's talking about kind of how we would look at the step down of intensity, as well as how does mixed use come into play in that. That's how I would try to answer that. And Desi might have some thoughts on that as well.
Might just add, as far as like impacting, the adjacent properties, we try to minimize that by encouraging things as like an amped up landscaping screen.
Sure.
And not allowing things in the rear yard setback or minimizing that, such as the balconies. So those two are kind of taken into consideration with this request and how we've kind of worked from where we started and where we are today. And so just
thank you both very much.
Can I ask are you done?
I am.
Can I ask a question? We're talking about, I want to go back to the impact of screening that Tom mentioned, and you just mentioned it again. In this case, the impact of screening was enhanced or increased by percentage of coverage or percentage of screen. Is it possible under a use permit situation, and that's another question I have in terms of a commissioner or commission's ability to add or take away from use permit conditions, is it possible to increase the size of the plant material? Again, based on the planting plan, we're talking about evergreens going in at 3-foot height or 6-foot height. In terms of deciduous trees, we're talking about smaller trees like redbud at a 5-foot height at planting, river birch at 6-foot height at planting, honey locust at 1.5 inches caliper, which is 8 foot tall, maybe, something like that. I mean, we have an expert on the commission that can talk about this in more detail than me. But is it possible to also, as a condition, ask for an increased size of the plant at planting?
I'll let Desi answer that.
Yes, you can add to the conditions. You can take away from the conditions. If you wanted to add to the conditions that landscaping material be planted at a 3-inch caliber versus a 1.5, I would maybe ask if, the applicant could come up and, just get his perspective on that too. But absolutely, you could add that as a condition of approval if you want.
That's why I wanted to get it out now, so that we can have applicant rebuttal, and then instead of leaving it till we discuss when we can't have anybody come back up, so.
Right, correct. Okay, that makes sense. Yes, thank you.
Good, thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else with questions for staff?
I have a question. I don't know. In your experience as a planner working with developers, I guess I should say, is it more profitable to be in the residential environment or in the office space or commercial environment?
You mean financially?
Yeah.
I can't answer that question. That's not really under my realm of what, we take into consideration as far as financially how it will affect them or not. So I can't answer that.
I mean, I wish I had a third-party expert, but I obviously don't. So, okay, thanks.
Anything else? Oh, Sandra?
I have a question. I'm going to take us over to traffic. So there's been a lot of conversation about traffic and impacts on not just folks who are trying to get around the strip mall or the commercial area, but also the impacts on the residential neighborhoods, people wanting to bypass traffic by going up and making turns onto Porter Ridge to either get out to Pine Lake or to 27th Street. And I know that Starbucks has come up and I'm not a commercial for them, but they've come up in the conversation both verbally and in letters about how much backup traffic there is. And I've personally participated in that backup. So I'll take some credit for that. But I am curious, when we talk about intersecting of traffic patterns, and it was good to see the figures today of daily vehicle trips for the office complex and for the mixed-use building. But I'm sort of curious about that post 5 o'clock traffic, because that's when residents are going to come home. I never looking for caffeine at 5 o'clock, so I don't know what it's like when you're trying to negotiate the drive-through and businesses closing and residents coming home. Did you look at that? Did public safety or roads look at that?
Yeah, I might ask Bob Simmerine with the Public Works Department to come up and kind of speak to specific traffic. Oh,
Bob left.
He's not here. Okay. Yeah, I mean, Public Works, Transportation, they've looked at the plans. They've confirmed these numbers with the Transportation Engineering Institute, and they've said specifically that these roads are built to handle, the public roads are built to handle this type of traffic. It's been planned for this piece of property to get developed in some way. And so ever since the original approval of these roads getting built, they've planned for generally traffic to continue to increase until it's fully built out. So that's what I could offer you as far as in addition to the Public Works, already reviewing it and saying that they don't see that there would be any issues with the way that the roads are currently built and signalized as well.
All right. Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, Desi.
Thank you.
Applicant rebuttal.
A couple things. While I was sitting there, I texted my office, and as far as the floor plate on the per building, 18,650 in each building. So that's going to be close. Okay. Regarding, I think you were asking about the PM trips.
Mm-hmm. It was.
And the PM trips, I think, is in the letter from the traffic engineer that I passed around. Is there a statement in there about the PM trips and how they're quite a bit less with this mixed use as opposed to the office medical? I think he has a statement in there, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, there is I'm looking at table 2.
So that's been addressed, I believe. Jane Hansen brought up the idea of light pollution. One of the things that we have in our meeting that we had with the abutting neighbors, which, by the way, after we met with the administration, they asked us specifically to meet with the abutting neighbors. That's why only 17 invitations went out. And we have talked to them about reducing any light on the south side of those buildings, since we're taking off the patios and just having that little ornamental railing so nobody falls out of their patio door. We're not putting anything that anybody could sit on. But we're not putting any lights on that side except for security. We'll have a number of security lights. That'll be down low on the first floor. So we're trying to address that. On the landscaping, one of the curious things about this whole subdivision, I just want to point something out. This is a little bit bigger, easier to see. This dashed line right here, that represents the 40-foot setback right here. And there was a picture shown of somebody standing in his backyard. I think it was maybe down in this general neck of the woods. And the buildings do not intrude at any point into that 40-foot setback, ever. And they never have. And the average is more than 40, whether that's 55 or 60, I don't know. But we are respecting that 40-foot. And when we pull the balconies off, none of them were intruding except right at this point right here. That was the reason that waiver was asked for the last time we were here, but we've taken that off, so that's gone. We have, when we worked up here originally off of 30th Street Court, you know, those houses were already living there. I'm going to put something else up here. So this area right up here, these all existed when this all was brought through in zoning, and whenever that was, years ago. And if you look up here by Eye Care Specialties, and if you were to drive down in here, you'll see that virtually all of the landscape screening is on the private lots, because we went to those folks and we said, hey, we want to do this. We'll put this landscaping on your lot. Is it okay? Sure. Yeah, that's fine. So that's how we dealt with that, because we're only 10 foot off the lot line with our retaining wall. Now, the abutting owners, we have made a proposal to them, if they want, that you know, we'll pay for a certain amount of trees on each of their individual lots. And what that does, especially up here on this side, is if you were to put landscaping on their lots for bigger trees, it foreshortens things. So, I mean, if your base is above where the base of the building is and you're planting your tree there, you will get coverage sooner. So we're trying to deal with that idea of coverage sooner on the landscaping, and we've made that offer to them, among other things that we've done, which are of a private nature to our abutting neighbors. So, I mean, I have 2 pages of things where we've heard concerns. We've tried to address them both from the planning commissioners and from the neighbors to try and get try and develop some sort of consensus. So I keep coming back to this notion of the green space behind the building. We have to have the density to put the underground parking in. If we don't have that, that has to become concrete. Now, Jane said, well, that gives us a whole bunch of more open space. Well, I'm a professional. I've done it for 43 years. And this is so much far superior in terms of land valuation to the neighbors. And we have done a study on that. And what we have found, looking at the county engineer or the county assessors, and this is public information, is that the houses that are next and abutting our commercial development have the highest valuation. They are increasing faster. And the people that are increasing the fastest are next to the daycare that we put in a half a dozen years ago or 6, 8 years ago, whenever that was. And that was, of course, a big battle also. So I don't want to disrespect any neighbor or any opinion that they might have, but I do not believe they can demonstrate that this will have a diminutive effect on their land valuations going forward. And I think we have historical data to kind of support our position on that, without a doubt. One of the folks referred to some duplexes that we built on South 16th over in Vavrine, and they showed the picture of our apartments in behind it and whatnot. Those were built as investment properties. Those duplexes were built and sold. They are not subdivided. So either an owner and a tenant or two tenants, that's how they were designed. So that's apples and oranges compared to the houses that they're sitting in right there. So I wanted to talk a moment about value on that. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any other questions you might have.
Questions?
I want to clarify.
Next,
When you said you had these neighborhood meetings, like the December one.
We've had
back in
5,
December,
yes.
who did you say you invited?
Okay, we had 3, well, first of all, when we do these neighborhood meetings, we get labels from the planning department to tell you, and so those go out. And so the very first one that we had was before we even submitted, and it went out to the local, to whoever was on the list. And then we submitted, and then we had a second meeting, and we sent it out to anybody that had contacted our office or contacted planning, so it was a bigger meeting. Then we came forward with our proposal to you folks. Then we had a meeting after that with just the, I think the president and the officers of the Porter Ridge West Association. So that was kind of, let's call it a private meeting, but it was a meeting with the neighbors. And then we had a 4th meeting. And then the last one was the one that the administration had asked us to go to, which was just for the abutting neighbors.
So just the 17?
Just the 17 that abutted us, yeah. And so that was at the request of the administration. And then we have sent mailers out to everybody about this meeting. I think we sent notices out to everybody that we had to come, right? Yeah. So we have not like tried to hide anything. We've been open about everything that we've been doing.
I have a question too about the decks on the south side. I know that they're going to be 24 inches. Are you going to have doors so they can actually go and stand out on these, or are they just?
We have these on our building on South 14th Street, just south of Pine Lake Road. And so we have, yes, we have doors. And these have a kind of a grill in the bottom.
So they could go out there and stand.
But that's all. You can't sit. You can't do anything else. They're decorative, so kind of more of a French railing type of feel. So people generally want to have the big openness so they can open their patio doors. And so that's what we're trying to achieve there. Now, we also, as part of the conversation with the neighbors, we had wraparound decks in our first application on the south, well, on the ends of each building. So we cut all those off. So if you're on the end of the building, you're either looking east or you're looking west. You're not able to sit out there and look south. So we've tried to address all these concerns.
Yeah.
Dick?
Rick, on your on the plan, landscape plan that's in our packet, it shows the plant material on the neighbors' properties. Is that necessary to meet your 100% screen?
No, I believe we put that on there because if somebody wants to do something, we have made an offer to those 17 neighbors, and if they ask, it's nothing for us to, take down a section of fence and go in there and spade in a tree. And so we're showing those already if somebody asks us. If they don't ask us, okay, but that is all an idea of trying to get the screen in first, soonest. And those things we can do right away. We don't have to wait until the thing is under construction. We can go in there today. You can pick up a year and a half, maybe 2 seasons, depending upon when they're planted. And I wanted to mention one other thing. You know, I've worked with Campbell's Nurseries for years, and I called Dick when we did the daycare, and I said, do you have any coniferous trees to put in the backyard of this daycare between us and the neighbors? That was one of the requirements. And he said, yeah, I've got some that I need to get moved. And so we put in bigger trees than what's required, and that's kind of the way we've done business in terms of plantings and this kind of things.
What I'm looking for is for you to say that you'll commit to do that here, because again, on the plan, it doesn't indicate that. And frankly, to put a 3 or 4 or 5 foot tall tree on the north side of the fence doesn't do any good.
I don't think I've ever planted a 3 or 4 or 5 foot tree.
Then what I would like to do is make sure that the landscape schedule that's on the plan is modified so that there's a commitment on the plan that larger trees, what I would call substantially mature, not all the way mature, that would be very difficult to do, but something that's substantially mature would get planted in lieu of what's on that plan. The plan bothers me. The plan is not representative of the perspectives that you show either. The perspectives that you show with that landscape screen is a screen that's 25 or 30 years from now. The people that I see in the back of the room probably aren't going to be living in those houses 25 or 30 years from now. So what I'm looking for is a commitment to try to get that screen, because I think the screen's a really important thing. I think the green space is important. I think that screen, for me, is one of the most important aspects that we're debating here, for you to really commit to get that thing beefed up.
Well, I will commit to beef that up. I would ask you to give us a target, okay? Because typically what I do is I get with whoever we're buying the trees from and say we need these trees, and get them in. So if you say, I don't know what the caliper diameter is on all of these things. I know typically we're using less coniferous trees now than we had been in years past. But give us a target and we'll commit to it.
How about if because it's not my responsibility to do that as a commissioner, how about if we say something and you get David or Steve or Desi, help me. If we were to say that you work with Colin, for example, to develop a plan that is substantially mature in terms of the landscape material. Is that fair?
I think that is fair for us.
I'm asking them, though.
I'll ask. I'm sorry.
Steve always has the answer.
Yes, I mean, we would take that as the substantially mature and perhaps it would be substantially larger at planting time.
Yeah.
I would say mature like these trees have reached their maturity, which that wouldn't make sense.
It needs to look like something, though, instead of this. And
the substantial increase in the planting size. Yeah. That is something we could then work with Colin, that if we would try to quantify that then for Rick to say, okay, these 1.5s, substantial would be 2.5s, et cetera.
I think it needs to be more than that, but I think Colin can.
Yes, we would try to work on that.
Yeah.
The only other comment I would make from when this was once brought up in a different project is that we had heard once that when you get to trees that are much older, let's say, which have a bigger caliper, that when they are transplanted, they actually don't grow as fast as a tree that might be a little bit smaller would grow. I would certainly defer to somebody who knows a lot more about transplanting trees than myself, but I would just pass that along in that that was a comment that we'd heard from some landscape people that, yeah, you're right, depending on the variety of the tree, you might be better off going with a smaller tree because that might ultimately grow faster.
And if it's appropriate, I would defer to my colleague, Dick Campbell.
If the root ball is of the correct size, they will grow at the same rate. It's really where somebody tries to move too big of a tree with too small of a root ball. That's where the setback will happen.
There's a lot of technical aspects here that I think are important, but what I'd like to do is have us try to achieve a goal that screen could be substantially bigger is the wrong word, but have more of an impact than what the plan now shows.
Substantially larger trees.
Yes.
at time of planting.
Right.
What we could do is we could try to quantify that and have that published in advance of the city council hearing.
That could be
That
good.
way, it is then known, okay, what did that go to? Did that go from 1.5 to 1 3/4? That doesn't sound very substantial.
No.
Or did it, you know, what was that number? But yes, we won't be able to do that right this second.
I understand.
But if you passed a motion that said substantial, we would definitely try
Yeah.
to our best degree to implement the spirit and intent of that motion.
And I think that some substantial would be somewhere in a 3 to 4 inch caliper or 10 to 12 foot in height on an evergreen.
Okay. And something that you would add like that might help us in it as well, for example.
It might be a good thing for you to maybe amend when we get to a point of making a motion. Any other questions?
It's not a,
We're in a rebuttal here, so.
no, I don't have a
Anything for
question
the
right now.
applicant?
I have another one. Mr. Kruger, can you tell me why you want to change this to a mixed use instead of just putting in those medical office buildings?
I think it's a better plan. And, you know, I will admit that there is a money component to this, but just from land use, it is a better plan to have that green space behind those folks. That will preserve their values. Now, I know some of them won't agree with me at this time, but that is the truth. From an urban standpoint, we have the traffic. Okay, here's something to think about. We have asked for 121 dwelling units. So how much land does it take to do 121 apartments? Well, I believe the planning department, generally speaking, figures on 15 dwelling units per acre, more or less, okay, when they do long scale. So that implies 8 acres of ground. That's the savings. And the infrastructure is already there for this community. It has been built. The road system is there. This proposal has less traffic, less PM trips. It's something that's called for. The comprehensive plan calls for, I believe this is right, David, they want 25%, a quarter of the new housing starts to be built in the built environment. Is that correct? More or less? Yes. Okay. This helps get us to that point. This proposal has 15 points where it complies with the comprehensive plan. Okay.
Yes, Tom, and then Sandra.
So, I guess I don't think that really got to what I wanted to, but.
I'm sorry.
Most of the stuff you mentioned is gonna be the same, whether it's office or residential, with the exception of the parking. But even if you built those 3 office buildings there, they'd still have that green space, correct?
No.
Parking.
No, they won't. And if I didn't make that clear, when we look at the existing Southridge Village, let me just get this here quickly for you. So this is office. This is the same zoning as this over here. Okay, that's the same zoning. You got residential over here, you got residential over here. What you see is we're 10 foot off that property line with our retaining wall. Landscaping's up on the neighbors, and that was part of our agreement with them back at that time. And we circulate around these buildings. We circulate around these buildings. So if we go, in fact, these are already set up for that. If we build just strictly commercial back here, we will circulate around these buildings. We will probably come in off of here and exit over here. And that is what we've done over here. And that's important on commercial properties, to be able to get around them. If you can get around to 3 and even 4 sides, that would be your goal. And what that does is that implies that this back here is going to not be green, it's going to be concrete, and it's going to be what we call the back of the house. So that's where you have your recycling, that's where you have your dumpster, that's where you have your utilities and those kinds of things. And that is what we've done in the past. So I'm not reinventing anything. I'm not saying something to scare people or any of this kind of thing. But in terms of, one of the things planning tries to do is to increase efficiency as we go forward, okay? And this does that. And it preserves not quite a third of the site in green space.
Okay, I think it was Tom and then Sandra. Is that right?
Mr. Kruger, could you provide us some historical context as you developed out the corner here as to why we have the zoning in the order in which we do and that process?
Well, this site is the last undeveloped parcel of what's called the South Ridge Coalition, which was roughly 400 acres. That includes South Point, where Pinnacle Bank is, and Walgreens and all that, of the Four Corners. And those Four Corners came together and agreed through the annexation process to pay for all the improvements, the street improvements, the sewer, the water, everything that was required at that time, with the exception of the bike trail that was referred to earlier that is behind north of Shields. That, I believe that was the only thing that Mayor Johans paid for back at that time. So all the improvements that are there were done privately. And by the way, this is being proposed privately. That's going to be done privately. So going through that whole process, in order to allocate costs for the improvements, zoning was allocated and square footage and trips were all to the various corners, okay?
Sure.
So that's what's brought us to this time. So this 53,000 square foot is a remainder on our site that is from that zoning action back whenever it was in the 90s. That brings us to this point. So you know, we have David talked about the kind of the layering, the step back type of thing. And so you have the H4 zoning, and with that H4 zoning, there are certain things that we gave up in the H4, like we don't have rock and gravel excavation and this kind of stuff. So some of the heavier uses were pulled out of there. And then we had the office, and then, in fact, the Porter Ridge townhomes that are there now, those were in part a layering, if you will, between that and the single family that's further south.
Sure.
Right, further south. And so that's how that came into being. And this proposal does not change the zone.
Sure.
Okay, so basically, what we're saying is we want a variance in height. And for that variance in height, you're going to have an acre of ground and green space, and it's going to be private. Now, we have had said to our immediate neighbors, we'll give you access to that and access to the amenities of our, just as if you were a resident of ours, if you want, if you ask for it. So we're going to maintain that people can't just cut through there. We'll have to have security, so that green space is going to be us and the neighbors are the only ones that will have access to that. Okay, that's not a public park. That's not anything like that. Okay, and one of the reasons we have it is so that we can get from one building to go outside over to the amenities in the other building where the pool is and that sort of thing. And the pool, by the way, is outside of the 40-foot setback. Okay, so all our amenities we're not getting in that 40-foot setback. Am I answering your question?
You are. Can I
Sure.
Can I add to it a little bit? So as evolution of the center occurred, and evolution of the residential occurred, and the city of Lincoln and the reform comes about. Can you talk about your evolution of your line of thinking about the use of this parcel and how it may be best used? Can you talk about your thoughts as the developer of the ground, how that process occurred for you?
Okay. Well, we only build for ourselves, and we have only done development on our own behalf. So we have retained ownership of the majority of that corner for our family, okay? We sold off Duto and some of the commercial buildings, but by and large, it's still ours. So part of the thinking is, what can we do that is most beneficial for the city? Because this is my hometown, okay? And so we believe that this parcel is better suited for this use, and it has to do with the elevations, especially on 29th Street to the east, you know, where it's down a little bit lower. We have the ability to put the underground parking in, which saves us surface parking. And by the way, it's been asked, well, why don't you just surface park everybody? These units this would be our 9th and our 10th building if these are built. And these units, they're market rate rents. They're not low-income housing or workforce housing or any other way. They're market rate, and those people like the semi-secured idea of being able to go in, use their garage door opener, get there, get on the elevator, go up to their units. Now, there's no commercial interchange between the residence and the commercial. They don't mix as a use. Okay, they're segregated. So we have, what I think is going to happen here is this is going to be probably the same type of age of person that the neighbors are. They're a little older, okay, maybe some are divorced. I don't see young people in here. I definitely don't really see many children in here. So I think it's going to be, the census of these buildings will be generally older than younger, okay? And these are people that would like to be close to services. So they're close to, you know, Super Saver, they're close to banking, they're not that far away from the golf course if they want to go to Wilderness Ridge. Those kinds of things I think will happen here. And I would judge this as a very strong residential site for the same reasons that people talk about their neighborhood so passionately, as they like it there, okay? They, you know, you kind of, in my position, you don't take anything personal. So when they talk about dumpsters and living behind buildings and all this stuff, it's a good place to live. And that's the dynamic that will fill these up. And in regards to the office on the first floor, that is a good, we have already established that that's a good office location. Now, some have asked, why do we put some units on the first floor? In my mind, you want those smaller units backing to the other residential. That's one of the reasons that we did that, okay? Because those are only 1 bedrooms on the first that we show in our plan. That's kind of what drove that decision on that.
Thank you.
Sandra.
I'm a fan of new urbanism and I like mixed use, but I am really concerned about the height of the residential use and the impact on privacy of the neighbors. And I'm wondering, how you would feel about having, changing your proposal to 35 feet?
Well, our buildings, even the one that was shown earlier over there off of 16th Street, those wouldn't fit in the 35-foot parameter because we have 9 foot for your first floor and then 2 foot for your floor system, and it doesn't work out. If you were to do that, the point of elevation, it'd be 29 foot would be where the head height would be on the 3rd floor, if you did it, because we did this calculation.
Okay.
Okay. And even then, it doesn't really work. But even at that point, except for the 2 houses at the very east end on 29th Street, everyone is going to be lower than that. Everyone is going to be lower than that. So that's it just doesn't work. And then you'd have to surface park it, everybody. It just
Tell me that one more time, because you said you wouldn't get the 4 stories, you'd get 3 stories. And then you said everyone would be lower than that.
No, you ask in terms of 35 foot. Okay, if you cap it at 35, okay. So I don't know if you can see this. So this would be the 29 foot off the first floor. So even at that point, you're still above everybody, except for the 2 buildings on the east end. Okay. But in a marketing world, that just can't work. Well, it can't work and have the underground parking.
Dick.
Rick, all of the office buildings that are on the very east side, all of those are 1 story, correct? So even with rooftop height, there have to be maximum 18 foot? Would that be right?
I think they're closer probably to 25. They have a 12-foot sidewall, and then by the time you get to the half of your ridge, you're probably more in the 25-foot range.
Okay.
And those...
Go ahead.
Those were designed to be sold. And if you look at the floor plate, those are like what we did at Lincoln Trade Center. They're generally 25 by 60s, 1,500 square foot. And the first couple of them had what we call bonus space. They had a little bit of second floor, but then the ADA came in, and we couldn't deal with it anymore. So most of them are just single floors.
Right.
But they were designed to sell, and that's why if you look on the site plan, you have small lots lined up together. Mm-hmm.
But the transition then to double that height on those mixed use buildings you're proposing, really is probably not a fair assessment comparing to the east.
Well, it's apples and oranges. I think they're quite different. But they're driven by the idea that you would be selling off those, and you can't hardly do that in a multi-story. So.
Right.
Dick, I think he was talking about the two houses on the east of the development and the view from them earlier, not this development on the
Yeah,
east. But
no, just the height
Yeah.
of the buildings.
Right.
Is what it is.
Is there? Oh,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
And you've indicated just now that you would not be able to afford to do the underground parking if it was just 2 stories of apartments with the mixed use?
Yes.
It just won't economically work.
You can't make a pencil out. And by the way, this is all privately financed. There's no TIF or any other subsidy of any kind whatsoever from the city. And if it doesn't fail, then I take the loss, not the city of Lincoln.
If you make it only 2 levels, though, you would have less parking needed. Would you need underground parking at that point?
It would be my judgment that you could not market those without providing some garages or some way for people to store their vehicles. And if you go with a conventional use, then you're still going to need to use the back area, but you can't because you can't build in those 40-foot. So that drives the decision to surface parking. And so we've looked at it many ways on this issue.
Is there a particular reason why this area is the last to develop in this section?
Well, I think we just kind of put it in our pocket and went over and worked on Favorina Meadows and down at Yankee Hill Business and other things. I think that's why.
Rick, can you remind me of how many units there are per floor?
Well, one of the building I think is showing 60 and one is 61. I'm kind of thinking there's 18 per floor and then a few down on first floor. I'm sorry to not be so precise, but I don't have that at the top of my head.
So that would eliminate 36 units if we took it down to 35 foot. Is that correct?
Yeah. See, your first floor on a mixed use like this, you need 14 foot.
Right.
So you're 14 and then 11 and 11, and then it just can't work.
So that'd be 54 parking spots that would be not necessary. Oh, yeah, 54 at the 1.5 ratio.
Anything else? Thank you.
I just have one thing finally. I mentioned that it conforms with the comprehensive plan. It increases the housing in the built environment. It has a greater taxable valuation by about $4.5 million from what we can do by right, according to the data that we've. So it has a substantial upside for the city. And then we talked about the 8 acres and then the comprehensive plan. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready to entertain a motion and discuss. Oh, we need to do
Okay.
separate motions.
That is correct.
So do the use permit first.
Yes, and a staff recommendation is for conditional approval of a use permit 100D.
Wow.
Crickets.
I'll move denial on the use permit.
I'll second.
Okay, let's discuss.
Go ahead.
There's a lot of I don't find myself disagreeing with a whole lot of people when they come up and talk, both from the neighborhood and the developer. This is the appropriate place for a project like this, in my opinion. I think it's a very walkable area. I think that it meets generally the goals of the newer elements of the comprehensive plan. I'm not still terribly confident that it's meeting the idea of a buffer that was put in place when this area was developed and zoned originally. I said when this proposal came through last time that I think that the very most that is, and I don't think this makes anyone happy, neighbors or developers, the very most that I felt very comfortable with was a 45-foot, and I'm going to stick to that. I don't, you know, I'm concerned about, I don't have concerns about the parking, to be honest with you. I do not have vast concerns about light intrusion or pollution. If we move to office medical, keep in mind we could be looking at things like loading docks. We could be looking at things like substantial trash containers all over the place. It could be a very different feel, not necessarily a better feel than what Mr. Kruger is proposing today. It's a hit or miss situation here. I, however, don't feel as though I'm comfortable going beyond the very max of what Mr. Kruger could build today under any circumstance, which is 45 foot, and that's why I will vote against this. May I also add?
Against the motion or?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
May I also add the landscaping? There have been vast improvements made, I think, to this proposal, the landscaping being one of them. I agree with I believe other commissioners are saying when I would like to see additional landscaping put in place, more mature landscaping put into place. I think it's great that commissioners and planning want to try to give some guidance there, but on the other hand, I feel like that falls into a developer's responsibility as well. So with that, I'll be quiet.
Okay, others? Anybody else?
Again, not to repeat what Tom just said, but very similar issues, and the height issue again is still that I'm fine with 45 again, like Tom was saying, but that's going to be my stumbling block also.
Ditto. It's the height for me.
Yeah.
And I hear what the neighbors said, that at the end of the day, privacy is the most important, and they would live with the medical at 45 because it won't be 24/7.
Yeah.
I really love this project in so many respects. I really appreciate all the different things that have been brought to light, including the enhanced landscaping, including you know, that new urbanism feel. I like a lot of the mixed use descriptions. I struggle with the landowner or the current homeowner's reliance on what was there when they made their decisions to purchase there, and the height restrictions that were in place, and their reliance on that is where I have to come against the project.
Dick?
I also have great difficulty with the height.
Yep.
If it were purely apartments, it would be at 35 foot. If it's the medical office, it'd be at 45 foot. But the height bothers me as far as being that close to other residential.
I echo a lot of what my fellow commissioners are saying. a couple of things that I keep in mind is we normally give preference to the existing conditions. And so in this application, that means I'm going to weigh a little more heavily on those built-out units than if this were someplace else where we didn't have something built already. And so that height is a very big concern. And I have to go with the neighbors. There's some incongruency here because the neighbors have concerns about traffic, about parking. But when I asked their number one concern, they said privacy. And I can understand when you get to that height with those apartments, they're going to be looking at you. You know, you're having more use at night as opposed to during the day. So that's kind of tough, and I understand that. But it is hard for me knowing that if we went with the office, we'd have less green space. We'd have more traffic. And so that's tough, but it comes back to the height. And that's what they're consistently saying. So if there's a way that we can get this in under the height, then that's going to be the best approach for the developer and for the neighbors.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I agree with, I think, everybody in terms of the height. I'm glad that we had discussion about the edge. I think the edge is a very important aspect of this. But I actually think the height is part of the edge debate, so it all kind of ties together for me.
As this moves forward to the city council, regardless of our vote, I don't know how to put it in there, but I would recommend as the city council looks at this, that they look at a minimum of 3 to 4 inch caliper on the shade trees and 10 to 12 foot high on the evergreens.
Good, so that's in the...
Just put it in there.
Yeah, it's in the record. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick.
Okay, anything else? I think maybe we're ready to vote then.
Okay. This is for the denial of use permit 100D. Beckius?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Okay, staff recommendation is conditional approval for special permit 1629I.
Motion?
Move approval, Core.
Second, Edgerton.
Any discussion on this?
I'm really fine with reducing it down to 300 because we've done that in so many other places in the city. It's really kind of our new standard. So to me, I kind of look at this as two separate applications, even though they are tied together, because I have no problems with the 300 limitation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't, generally speaking, for the entire site, I don't have a problem with the reduction either. You know, I think sometimes this site, because of the success of the tenants, especially on the east side of this site can feel a lot heavier trafficked than others in the area. But the site as a whole is balancing fine, and I don't have a problem with the reduction.
Okay, go ahead.
I agree with what they're saying. I just wanted to confirm that we're talking about the 1 to 300 and the 1.5 to 2. Okay, just confirming. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready to vote for that.
Okay, this is for the conditional approval of special permit 1629I. Beckius?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
Okay, at this time, anyone wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda may do so. We are adjourned.